this Richard Strocher guy too.
Yeah. I thought, you know what's funny about that?
Sorry.
I swear to God,
that's the
for
guy's
several
name.
days I thought it was Richard Spencer who had put it.
Same. That was actually like the first time I read a tweet, like somebody sent me like a screenshot of the tweet or something. I was like, Richard Spencer made it funny. And then I was like, oh wait.
No, but the account is legitimately Richard.
The guy's name is Richard Strocher.
Yeah.
And this guy also got like I know.
Okay.
Dick Strocher.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Just making, and that's a meme account, obviously, right?
I think it might be his real name.
No.
I'm not sure.
Impossible. Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Reaction, your weekly source for independent commentary on news, politics, and culture, where it's always our mission to arm you with the tools you need to cut through media misdirection and resist the mono-narrative. David, what are we talking about today?
This week, God dropped the ultimate Uno reversal card. The internet is now obsessed with Jewish tunnels.
Yes.
Number 2, Iowa caucuses are next week. Chris Christie is out. Vivek wasn't invited to the establishment debate party, so he hung out with the internet instead with the Timcast, and Trump does CNN to defend his record. 3rd, your grandpa can now buy Bitcoin, thanks to Gary Gensler, who is not a Batman villain. He is the SEC chairman.
You might think he was, though.
Biden decides to drop bombs on Yemen without congressional approval. This is either continuing the war on terror, policing the world, or the bombing of Israel, and the conflict in Israel has now turned into a regional war, depending on your lens.
Obama.
And while you're here, like, comment, and subscribe. We just hit 600 on YouTube. We're a bunch of other, whatever the numbers are elsewhere.
Yeah.
YouTube's just the one that's public, so I always see that one, right?
Yeah.
So, and wherever you're following us, follow us there, comment, like, subscribe, share it with your friends. We're getting a lot of comments on everything that we do. I get them all like every week, so thanks everybody. It makes me feel good.
One epic troll on TikTok, and he is hilarious.
What's his name?
Yeah, I put him in the Discord.
I know you did. Let's call him out.
I can't remember what it is, but
Let's
this guy.
not call him out.
We're gonna call him out.
He's so great.
He is hilarious. We'll leave him.
I never know where he's going to wind up on his opinions. Anyways, so Jewish tunnels.
God, this is just a good one.
All right, so what's the story here? That basically there were tunnels being dug by apparently a bunch of international exchange students who are all Jewish.
Well, this is
in this
news to me.
particular Jewish sect that isn't Hasidic. It's actually them and the Hasidics don't like each other. In fact, this guy, the leader of this group, has like police protection because of the death threats, because there's like a religious conflict going on between the Hasidics and these guys. And they have this court process and they can't get into this part of the building that they no longer can get access to. So they dug a tunnel. This is their motivation. They say they dug a tunnel underneath to get access to another spot without having to go outside, and to get access to what they felt like was their old sanctuary, to expand their current sanctuary.
I guess I
confused.
I went full left curve on this and just entirely followed the memes on this one. The memes on X were hilarious about this.
The New York Post article does make it clear, but it's still very confusing exactly what the motive is. And at least a part of this is because not everyone is like very fluent in English that's talking about this, right? And then there's a lot of like, you watch the interviews of people and you're not really sure, and there's a lot of conflicting reports. So it's too early to say, but that said, the internet took this and went absolutely wild with it.
Well,
it's been hilarious to watch.
Yeah, and we have this guy here, Richard Strocher, who has a podcast show he's on like The Blaze and Fox or something. Funny name.
Great name.
Richard
This guy
Strocher.
This specific story came across my radar last night. Shared to me by my roommate here. Okay, so this guy Richard Strocher posted some tweets as far back as November 7th, 2023, last year, months ago, saying, quote, "There are Jews living under my apartment. I hear them. It's like they're digging or something. For the record, I live at ground level and we do not have a basement." This is November 7th, 2023. And then another tweet. "I swear I keep hearing Yiddish under the floor in my New York apartment. I live at ground level and we have no basement." December 11th, 2023. And as of, just January 8th, he posts these tweets. I am not crazy. And the best one. Some of you owe me an apology.
2.5 million views on that tweet.
This poor guy was probably getting called a lot of names for, being anti-Semitic and stuff, right?
It's saying,
it's like, are the Jews here with us right now, Richard?
Okay. So the funny thing is, I thought this was Richard Spencer.
When I first saw it, because
who lives in Whitefish, but I was like, did he at one point live in New York? I didn't look at it that closely.
Who is, if for those that don't know, like a big neo-Nazi character, right?
Yeah. He's a terrible racist. Anyways, he's exactly the sort of guy who would have paranoid delusions about Jews living beneath him, and then this story comes out, and he's like, you owe me an apology.
I told you there was Yiddish under the basement.
But thank God it's Richard Strocher. Not Richard.
Great name.
Great name.
Good old
Such
Dick
a
Stroker.
great name.
So the other part of this that I have questions about, I really want to know if his Twitter feed ever addresses this, is does he live in this area, or is this just a more common phenomena that we're talking about here? This is the strange thing.
Is he somewhere else in New York?
And there are more tunnels?
More tunnels?
That's
are they just tunneling everywhere? Like, is there like an underground city going on right here?
They're like mole people.
It's like the mole people in Vegas, right?
Yeah.
Like, what's happening here?
What's going on here?
Well, there's been so much conspiracy around this on Twitter. It's been really interesting to see it all, and we won't go into all of it. Like, just go type Jewish tunnels into Twitter and just have fun. Just have fun, okay?
Don't take any of it too seriously, guys. Don't. I mean,
True.
come on now. There's a lot of people who this fits their books, and they've been waiting for an excuse to talk about tunnels.
Well, and also,
people like doing things in tunnels, right? I mean,
well, there's also obviously been a lot with the Epstein files and all this stuff, and so I think we have like human trafficking on the brain,
which
and
include airplanes, not tunnels. The exact opposite of tunnel is an airplane. I'm just going to make that point.
That is fair. Doesn't mean that human trafficking is precluded from tunnels. In fact, tunnels have been obviously used and for a long time.
That said, there's no evidence of human trafficking in this case,
except for that one really grimy mattress.
But you don't know
got
what
thrown
that
out of there.
Been. Someone could have that could have been a million things.
I'm not saying it was, but that was weird to see.
Someone had a bloody nose. It could have been a million different things. The reason that could have happened.
That is not a good faith argument. Did you see the size of the stain on that mattress? That is not a bloody nose, sir.
Oh, I don't know.
If that person had a bloody nose, they bled out of their face.
Or he cut themselves. I don't know. Who knows? It's hard to say.
What was it doing in there?
It could have been ketchup. You don't know.
What is ketchup doing on a mattress in a tunnel?
The guy could have been eating a hot dog. He could have been doing it straight up.
Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney's down there just
this is where Chris Christie and Mitt Romney go to eat hot dogs in secret. We've solved the mystery.
No, I'm just saying we don't know. It's completely circumstantial. People are leaping to a lot of conclusions. Be very careful.
Wasn't there some stuff about police reports and like some rape gang that was going on over there?
Rape gang?
I did see talking about this.
Oh no, I haven't.
Again, most of my knowledge of this is from the memes.
Yeah.
I have seen like there were things about police reports.
Well,
about
I mean,
that,
so like it's one of those like composition fallacy things. So like somebody will in a bad faith actor will take a story like this and they'll be like, oh yeah, but this one time a Jewish guy who was Hasidic was accused of rape and therefore this was that. It's a terrible argument. That's not how it works. Right, you got to actually have material evidence that connects that person to this area in order to this be related to that.
For sure.
This could be totally two unrelated people. That said, there's also been a ton of people who aren't reconciling that these are actually two different sects. Also, yes, they have the same hat and they look similar and they both speak Yiddish, but they're not the same group.
And all of you that are confusing them are racists.
No,
congratulations.
I'm saying I don't know the doctrinal differences. I'm just saying that they're kind of like lumping them all together, right?
And if you do that, you're racist.
Yeah. I think there's bigotry in that if you're just like intentionally like ignoring the differences and and additionally, if you were set out like, I know there are tunnels where people are being trafficked because QAnon told me so, and then this feeds into that, then you're not doing very careful thinking.
But it's also a thing where It could be possible.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, it could be possible.
It is
But
possible.
right now, it's still in the could be possible realm.
Yes.
Right?
But David is certain that it is a thing and it is human trafficking. All right, next subject. Let's go.
So also speaking of human trafficking, we have the presidential campaigns going on in Iowa.
Just trafficking news reporters around.
Oh man, that's an interesting way to frame that.
Iowa Caucus is in January 15th on Monday. And we'll see kind of where the GOP lands here. Iowa Caucus is a very important event. Right before the caucus, though, we have Chris Christie, who dropped out of the race.
I don't have an.
How do we feel about that, gentlemen?
I am overjoyed.
That's the best one I got.
He did give out this speech where he was talking about how I am the only man willing to tell you the truth about Donald Trump. And then right after that speech, he was caught on a hot mic. So let's play that hot mic situation here, captured by AP.
Like that.
Yeah, that's what you get.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, she spent $68 million so far, just on TV. Spent
Speaking of
$68
Nikki.
million so far, $59 million by DeSantis, and we spent 12. I mean, who's punching above their weight and who's getting a return on their investment, you know? And she's going to get smoked, and you and I both know it. She's not up to this.
She hasn't even been.
And she's still 20 points behind Trump in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he's still going to carry Iowa, right?
Yes, always. I talked to DeSantis called me, petrified that I would.
He's probably getting out of half of Iowa.
Well,
And I think that's really unfortunate that either the hot mic cut off or the AP decided not to release more.
Yeah,
I'm very
petrified that
curious.
what?
Yeah. Well, my theory, obviously this is speculation, so take it with a grain of salt. My theory is that what they're worried about is just splitting the anti-Trump vote too much, right? And so DeSantis probably called him and said, I would really like to get you to that race so that I can have this opportunity to actually go head-to-head against Haley and actually get coalesce the Trump coalition, the anti-Trump coalition.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So many things to say about that. First of all, I don't think Chris should be making jokes about punching above his weight.
Additionally,
it's
a terrible argument. You're dropping out of the race right now, bro. It wasn't a good return on investment. In fact, it was a giant waste of money.
Yeah, it was
because
$12 million
never had
flushed.
a chance. But you did get paid, and a lot of vendors got paid very well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the little secret of presidential politics is most of the reason these people are running is to funnel money into the vendors, which are like all the buddies and the it's like there's like a whole industrial complex that exists here within politics, right?
Vendors for what exactly?
Your mail vendor.
Yeah. The people doing the mail advertising, your data programs that you're using for all your grassroots activities,
Media
all that
partners.
Stuff, right? Yeah.
And it can be hilariously incestuous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the amount of people who are former campaign staffers who are like married to somebody who's a mail vendor and they direct the money that way. Oh man, it's everywhere in politics.
A lot of
Also,
nepotism.
one of the reasons why I think a lot of campaigning doesn't innovate very much is because it's just all these people doing the same things over and over again, just making a buck. And then you end up having these like newcomer candidates that are there's a lot more value for your dollar spent on people like say Trump or Vivek or RFK or something like that, because they're not doing the traditional methods, because they're not in the clique of where all the normal donor dollars are going, right?
There's also like you if you are connected that way and you're the mail vendor, the TV vendor, you're like, well, why would you spend money on digital? I mean, obviously all the best mail has this advantage and this, so it's like this pitching process.
Here's our data
dominates the
on our poli-sci graphs that suggests that this is the way that you're supposed to spend all your donor dollars.
Spend all your money on mail.
And then they filter that data through academia, and everybody gets trained up in that, and it's the same thing that you see, right?
Right.
It's a giant scam.
It's a scam.
It's a scam.
Interesting. So, what did he think DeSantis was petrified about?
Well, I think about the anti-Trump vote not coalescing together.
Or could it be that he thinks he's petrified that DeSantis or that Christie would endorse Nikki instead of him?
Ooh, that could be
upon dropping out.
They have been hashing it out a lot on Twitter. Like the two sides are very antithetical to each other, which makes sense because they're both like it's either you're voting for Trump or Vivek or you're voting for DeSantis or Haley, right?
Right.
And so if they need to make some sort of a splash, and they know they're not going to win Iowa, but they can send a signal being like, we're going to get them. Like, we got all the support behind us, and we're going to move in big to Super Tuesday and stuff, right? So, like, there's the optic situation of, like, yeah, we all know Trump's the leader, but it's not as clear cut as everyone thinks it is. Like, that's what they need to have. But if they're splitting all the vote and everybody's just getting like 2%, right? It changes things.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, obviously Trump's the guy, right?
How has Vivek been innovating in Iowa? It seems like I've been seeing his face everywhere. And obviously, friend of the show, Henri Pellerin, editor and founder of libertyportal.com, went to Iowa, got to ask him some questions, got to be a part of the HQ situation, which seemed really cool. Definitely check him out on Twitter for that stuff. How do you guys think Vivek is going to do with all of the events and stuff he's been hosting?
Well, I've been noticing he's getting a lot of big endorsements in Iowa. There's a lot of like big state legislators and also like congressmen and things like that are supporting him. He's also just the most on the ground. My understanding is he's done more events in Iowa than every other candidate combined.
The last number I heard him say was 390 events in Iowa.
I've watched some things from those events. Like he has a live feed of every single one of those events, and they seem very positive, very packed. I could see this potential of there being some sort of an upset. I don't think he's going to beat Trump or anything, but like I think the polling is suggesting that he's going to do a lot worse than he actually is. I think he's energizing a lot of non-traditional voters to come out and caucus. There's probably going to be a lot of first-time caucus people there, which was the same case with Trump back in the day. There was a lot of first-time caucus goers.
So
right.
For those of us that aren't savvy with this stuff, what the hell is a caucus? And why is it different than a primary?
So a caucus is like a party meeting. So it's more like a central committee meeting that might happen. So in a primary, everyone goes and votes at a ballot, and it's kind of outside the party's control. While a caucus is more like you get together and you caucus together to come up with a solution for your group. And you basically take a vote within that group, and then that then goes forward. So you'll have all these separate caucuses going on.
Caucus-eye?
Cockeye.
Cockeye?
No, caucuses.
Oh, okay.
And basically,
Coctopi.
Coctopi. Sorry.
there are 1,657 caucus sites this year.
How many?
1,657.
Okay, so these occur in communities all around Iowa, and within one caucus site, people will get into small groups and they will sort of like debate and
who they want to be the party selection.
And then that group will have to coalesce a vote of some kind, and that group will then say, our group votes that it should be Donald Trump or whoever.
Right.
And they pass that in to someone, and then those all get counted, and then whoever has
wins.
the most is who wins.
Right.
Gotcha.
So it's a little bit different than a pure, democracy, right? It's more like a staged democracy. We got micro, almost more like a federation.
Right. Like little states that get to, vote for their elector, if you will.
Right. It's more communitarian.
What are the advantages to this process over a primary? Are there any, or why do states choose to do that versus a primary?
Well, it's more debate, right? And more like people get together and actually say, for our community, who's best, right? It's a very different, like it's less individualistic. It's more group orientated in a way. I've heard it explained that, it's kind of like a traditional process that made a lot of sense back in the day. And, more traditional communities like to hold on to that process.
Interesting.
If you look at states that were formed in, when mail was much more abundant and readily available in the progressive era, that they're much more likely to be, not as communitarian in this way, right? Because you can just mail it in directly or go and vote and aggregate the votes within a day.
Yeah, being the first state and like the caucus state, I think is a very embedded thing in political culture there too. That if you're outside of Iowa, it's just like, what is going like? Because we're all used to in other states, it's just like we see the billboards, we see the yard signs, we see the stuff, and then we're following name ID. There's like a culture that is embedded within Iowa voters, not across all of Iowa, but like the people that are very politically engaged. Whereas like this is the thing we do, right?
It's their kind of claim to fame within the political process that they're first, and they they run it a certain way, and that's
well, and it is cool because
important.
like there is kind of a symbolic thing there too of you have all of these candidates coming in and doing these massive town halls, and they have to because you need to get to know the people embedded with that hyperculture, that are the people that are going to be going to a caucus. You have to get to know them, and there is kind of something that is almost like a humanization of the candidate there. So
Yeah.
like the candidates are all going to the fairs, they're eating on the hot dogs at the fair and stuff. Oh, Mitt Romney,
Where you
would
get
have
all
loved
the
that place.
corn dogs you can find. Yeah, and it's also like it's a Midwest, agricultural state. It's not a place that you would otherwise spend a lot of time in. If it was just everyone was voting on the same day, you'd spend all your time in the large states, right?
So this process that is so geared around kind of getting to know the candidates could play well for a candidate like Vivek, who's spending so much time doing all these events, getting to know people. It's more possible that those people that have showed up to his events perhaps could go to their caucus and be more outspoken because they heard this guy speak, and maybe have a little more sway and a little more influence over other voters directly in the process, as opposed to a primary state perhaps where they're just going to go and vote the way they're going to vote, but they might not have the opportunity to talk to other voters immediately about it, proximate to voting day, right?
Right.
I think caucusers too, people that are super politically engaged, would enjoy Vivek's style. Like if you see him on live, because he's not as rehearsed. Like he has his lines that you hear all the time.
Yeah.
But when he's doing, say, what he did a couple days ago on having Timcast live on stage with Candace Owens, you can the audience can kind of watch him think through ideas and take questions too. And I think the general person in that culture would probably appreciate that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Instead of just getting the candidate, because like you have the Nikki Haley moment where she was asked about the Civil War and she's kind of like, "What do you want me to say about slavery?" Right?
Yeah, she was asked what was the cause of the Civil War, right? And she kind of like froze and didn't have an answer. It was sort of an additional like 3 provinces moment.
Well, when she also straight up asked, "What do you want me to say about slavery?"
Yeah, like what do you want me to say?
Which was like a weird there's like a weird brain personality thing there that I think is like she's waiting to be a vessel that is filled with ideas, right?
Yes.
from the people around her.
Yes.
Where you end up having somebody like Vivek or an RFK on the Democratic side, even though he's running as an independent, who's much more just like thinking through the ideas as he goes. Like I watched a video last night of Vivek. There's a big guy, Mike Benz, is that his name? He's a big on the censorship industrial complex, fighting against it. He's a big kind of articulate voice on that, where he was driving Vivek, I think, to his next event and just interviewing him in the car ride. And you could watch Vivek thinking through ideas in real time about really high level issues about what to do about censorship. And he'd even be like, "Man, I never even really thought about it that way." And he keeps going, right? I think that somebody that's really politically engaged and is really concerned about where the country's heading, they look at that and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's kind of nice."
This guy can grapple with real ideas in real time and make some conclusions.
That said, Iowa's very Christian and very boomer. So
The Hindu thing.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of questions raised about that.
So we'll see how he does.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting question. I mean, he did, obviously, so what we had was Chris Christie dropped out. We do have Trump's response to that. Do we want to see how Trump responded to Chris Christie dropping out of the race?
Yeah.
Now, Chris Christie was in, and he got a hot mic I heard about. I thought actually the bigger story wasn't the fact that he dropped out. Nobody cared too much about that. But he had a hot mic where he was talking to somebody about the weather, and he happened to say that she doesn't have what it takes. She'll be creamed in the election. And I mean, I know her very well, and I happen to believe that Chris Christie is right. That's one of the few things he's been right about, actually.
So you don't think it changes the dynamic much?
I don't know if it does or not. Look, we're winning tremendously here. I think we're 20, 24 points up. I brought some polls if you want to see them, just in case. But I think we're 24, 25 points up. But New Hampshire's interesting. It's a great place, a great state, unbelievable people. But they allow independents and Democrats to vote in the Republican primary. You say, what's that all about? So it's a little bit false in that regard. But even with that, I think we'll win substantially.
So, what he's referring to is that New Hampshire is an open primary state, which would mean that you can choose. You can't vote in every party's primary, but you can vote in whatever one you choose to.
Yeah.
I see. It's interesting.
Unlike the caucuses, where you got to be a registered Republican to go caucus.
Yeah, and a lot of a lot of states, you choose your party affiliation prior. Like you are a registered Democrat, a registered Republican.
Right.
Some states you don't register, right? And you just decide on the moment of the primaries. I'm going to vote Democrat this time, right?
Yep.
Which has a lot of crossover votes, and people play that tactically sometimes.
So
I don't know how worthwhile that is, though.
He's kind of setting himself up for, well, if New Hampshire doesn't go well, then I'm going to be able to write it off. But New Hampshire is a substantial like dipstick too, of where a lot of the public is at on the thing. So
Interesting.
we'll see. But yeah, I think he's right. Chris Christie kind of dropped out, and there wasn't very much there, right? And then, but the hot mic moment really did catch on, and was kind of the more major news story. Vivek actually predicts that out of that it's going to be, after probably Iowa, when Vivek overperforms, is his theory, is that there's going to be Haley or DeSantis is going to be one of the others VP, depending on how it shakes out.
To really try to coalesce that anti-Trump vote.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually have a clip of that if we want to watch it. He's doing one of his talk to the camera moments where he's just talking about that exact thing. Do we want to cover that?
Let's check it out.
The system wants to narrow this down to a two-horse race between Donald Trump and a puppet who they can control. And it has become increasingly clear that puppet is not a Democrat. It's not even Gavin Newsom. It's Nikki Haley. It's in our own party. Well, today, one more step in that plot unfolds. Chris Christie drops out. Next up, I'm going to make a prediction. You're actually going to see Ron DeSantis join Nikki Haley's ticket. He's going to be her VP. The whole game, it's hiding in plain sight. Whatever it takes, and this system will stop at nothing. And I mean nothing. To eliminate Donald Trump from contention. It's disgusting. But the same people who have said they're not going to actually take a principled stand against Trump's removal from the ballot, Haley and DeSantis are both in that category. Do the math, people. That's next up. Ron DeSantis is after Iowa. Everybody, including Chris Christie, apparently got a phone call from Ron DeSantis. Panicked was the word that Chris Christie used. This is the way the plot's going. Ron may not know this. Ron DeSantis may not know this, but that's what his donors are going to make him do. That's what's coming next. Ron DeSantis will become Nikki's VP, whether or not Ron knows it. It's not really his choice. He's not the one in charge of that decision. And then the plot continues. We have to open our eyes and not fall into their trap. Our America First agenda cannot end. Our movement cannot end with Donald Trump when they take him out from contention. And if you think this system is going to even let this man get anywhere near the White House, we need to open our eyes. We need to do the right thing for our country. They are selling us the rope today that they're going to use to hang us tomorrow. Do not fall into the trap, people. And that's why I'm here.
It's a good case. Now, Haley and DeSantis had their own special little CNN debate that they did separate from everybody else. So the Vivek, although being in the race, was not invited. I don't remember. Did you ever catch why Vivek wasn't there?
I think he's because he's in fourth place, according to their polls.
Oh, so what? Why wouldn't you have him?
Because they're narrowing it down. I think that's the argument.
I don't think they like how they treated their anchor during his town hall. He kind of just he beat their game, and I don't think they like that very much.
John Cena.
They're in this,
it was bad.
They're in this weird.
Body
Yeah, they're in this weird mode where they're like, he gets clips, but he kind of embarrasses us. But
yeah, it's like, we just don't like that he's getting views that don't make us look very good.
And I would have to imagine part of the calculus of the blob in general, like. Oftentimes when we talk about they here, we're talking about there's kind of like this ethos, and they don't want this that ethos does not want Vivek to do well in Iowa at all. They want it to be discouraged, so they need to make sure that he's not on the stage. I would imagine.
Yeah, you have to make him invisible.
Yeah.
This is giving me serious Ron Paul vibes too. The way that they would manipulate polling around Ron Paul's success or favorability, things like that.
Happens with outsider candidates all the time. Like that's just a part of the game, and how it works is they will completely, like, remember during the Ron Paul Giuliani moment, you had all the donor class in there clapping for Giuliani, but then the public polling outside says that everybody loved Ron Paul. And then they would just erase him from, like, they wouldn't even show him on the stats on where people stand. Similar to Ben Shapiro just did this.
Oh, really?
Ben Shapiro said, Chris Christie's dropped out, meaning there's only 3 left. And Trump, DeSantis, and Nikki, right?
Well, Ben Shapiro, ladies and gentlemen. Do you think
he
that...
He gets tunnel vision sometimes.
Sometimes he does get tunnel vision. This is a New York tunnel joke. Sorry about it. I had a good question, and then you just threw me all off. Do you think that the media perception of success or lack thereof, especially as it relates to Vivek, is going to affect the way that people caucus for him? Or do you think that there is an ability for Vivek to break through with his grassroots efforts and his work on the ground through the media narrative that he's not doing well? Which one's going to triumph in this case?
I don't know. I really don't. I go back and forth personally on how captured the American public is by the corporate press, like narrative manipulations, and how much people have actually broken free of that. I'm not sure yet. Like, because for me, I'm completely out of it. Like, I don't see any of the corporate press stuff at all, really. I have every single New York Times reporter blocked. I have a bot that auto blocks New York Times reporters.
Should probably expand that to like CNN too, and just keep going, right?
Yeah, you still need some of it, but like, so I don't know how captured just the normal person is. Like the average boomer who decides, like, the elections are decided by the suburban white boomer female, right? Like, it's that demographic that matters.
Karens vote.
Yeah, Karens matter.
Karens matter.
They're not all Karens, guys. Be cool.
Hey, it's a trope. We get it. David, what's your take? Do you think that Vivek will be able to rise above the media narratives, or is that going to prevail?
I think that it's an open question. The question is how much does being the internet candidate actually help you in this year? Now, we think it probably helped more than any year previous, but is the cable news, the alternative, the mainstream ways or the corporate ways to get your information, is that still strong enough to keep him out of, being a bigger contender? And then second, he's actually running as the second choice to Donald Trump in a lot of ways. He frames it that way himself at times, and then says, hey, I'm the escape hatch. And I think that's actually the smartest way to run if you want to win and actually become president, rather than just run to raise money and to increase your book sales or something. And then he's getting those benefits too, but he's actually running, I think, the best way you can run and maintain a long-term presence in the party as a semi-outsider, as a, anti-establishment candidate. As
the default choice to accept the Trump crowd once Trump, decides not to run.
Yeah, if Trump, for whatever reason, is disqualified from the ballot in enough states, and it comes down to the question of are we going to let Joe Biden become president again or not? And that crowd then has to say, okay, who am I going to jump to? Who's Trump going to, endorse for his votes to go to? Probably nobody. But if there's going to be somebody, it's going to be Vivek, who's the only one he has anything nice to say about.
And it'll also matter. It'll be curious to see the under 40, how much they actually turn out, like the under 40 years old. Because those are the people that Vivek really courts, is millennials, really. And everybody kind of rags on millennials, but millennials are turning 40 now, right? Yeah. Like these are people that are ahead in their lives now. Like they have families. They're actually much more politically engaged. It's not like it was 10 years ago where everybody ragged on millennials. Yeah. And millennials in general are very kind of against the boomer policy regime that we've been under for a long period of time. It'll kind of depend on where they are in the turnout, I would say, because those are Vivek's real supporters. And millennials in general, I think, are less so inclined to vote for Trump over Vivek, where it's the opposite for the other generations, right?
Yeah, Gen X tends to be similar, right? They're more split down the internet culture. Millennials been more internet culture. The male-female split's also bigger between women, and millennials tend to be more Democrat, men tend to be more Republican, more so than previous generations. There's a whole bunch of ways that splits, depending on whether or not boomers decide not to vote for whatever reason, or if the demographic split is boomers die off, that Gen X millennials are starting to take up a larger part of the electorate that votes. Now, if that changed tomorrow and people under the age of 20 started voting at a high rate, it would change our politics completely. Everything about it, right? Because there are an actual bigger nominal population, especially what you count immigrants who can vote. Like people who have gained citizenship and can vote.
Yeah, legal immigrants.
Yeah. When you get to there, then you're talking about a very different, but they vote at much lower rates, so therefore they're a lot smaller nominal part of the, and then they're also less likely to vote in caucus states, because caucusing is way more time and effort and Byzantine.
You actually have to talk to people, which I know that Gen Z really doesn't like to do as much.
Well, millennials do, and like the internet generation too.
It is interesting too, because the right in general is just getting more and more on board with the idea of Vivek being the VP candidate. And one of the things I was always thinking about is like, why? I was always kind of like, about Vivek being Trump's VP, because like, what does he actually gain there? Like, because you want your VP to be somebody that gains you something. Like, otherwise it's like, it's not, if it's just the same person, it doesn't really matter. But that being said, kind of like I was just saying before, Trump doesn't have the young people like Vivek does. But you end up getting kind of a coalescing around similar ideals, similar enough at least. But then you end up having both generations there. Right. And that'd be very powerful going into the general, assuming Vivek's wrong here and they don't. Like, that's actually another thing about Vivek, is he's kind of like openly saying now, like, no, the strategy is that Trump's not going to be allowed to run.
They're going to try to prevent him from running.
Yeah, he's kind of like openly saying that now, which is very interesting.
That was interesting. Additionally, to note, I'm not sure that Trump actually needs Vivek for the young people. He actually outperforms Biden, ages 18 to 34, with 46%.
Trump does.
Yeah.
I think there's an energizing factor. Like,
there's also that.
Yeah, it's much more, you end up having the youth energized. And when I say youth, I'm actually saying 40 and under. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying necessarily like 30 under. I think that there's a lot of people in that 30 to 40 range that are very, and frankly, are disaffected lefties too. There's a lot of lefty crossover that is coming over to Vivek, because they've like now made some money and they're not just socialist Bernie bros anymore. like I'm seeing that in real time right now on my Twitter feed of like people that were diehard Bernie bros years ago, like 6-8 years ago, that are now like, yeah, then I made money and I realized that socialism's stupid.
Yeah. But they also still have a social circle where maybe that hasn't really completely, set itself in. And so they're still a little bit like, well, Trump, they don't want to commit to a Trump-like figure. They can't commit to a Trump-like figure for those kind of social reasons of not wanting to be ostracized by their friends.
I think there's something too where there's a vision that people under 40 have of the Republican Party. And so people that hit a certain age, they think of Republican as kind of the neocon Buckley Republicanism that came across. But now all of that's changed. And Trump has been a major driver in that change happening. But then you have a young guy that kind of represents like, oh, things are different. The Republican Party has changed. Just like in their eyes, the Democrat Party left them.
Right.
Right. And now they're like, oh, they feel lost, and there might be a home for them here.
Yeah.
Right?
Without the baggage.
Without the baggage of like, for instance, it's like I like the economics of Republicans, but like the gay marriage, abortion stuff, like they get kind of weird about that. So like so that's where they flip flop and get kind of weird. But if you kind of tone down some of the social issues and really amp up the economic issues, I think that those people cross over.
Yeah. And I think Vivek has some really compelling answers to some of those questions that people have, the social issue stuff.
Yeah.
So we also had, of course, the non-invited CNN debate where they got into immigration reform, as that issue is probably going to define this election cycle.
This has been one of the biggest years for illegal border crossings into the United States. Last month alone, 225,000 migrants illegally crossed the southern border. It's a record high, overwhelming the Border Patrol resources that are already stretched thin. Mayors across the country say their cities are being pushed to a breaking point. Governor DeSantis, former President Trump, famously promised to build a wall on the southern border. He obviously did not get that done. You have promised to finish the job. How will you succeed where he failed?
We will build a wall. We will actually have Mexico pay for it in the way that I thought Donald Trump was. We're going to charge fees on remittances that workers send to foreign countries, billions of dollars. We'll build the wall. He also promised record deportations. Donald Trump deported fewer people than Barack Obama did when he was president. Biden's let in 8 million people just in 4 years. They all have to go back. We have to enforce the rule of law in this country. Think about what's happening to our country. Just this week, we saw the news that a school in Brooklyn, New York, had the kids stay home. They were not able to go to school, told you can't go get an in-person education. Why? Because the city's commandeering the school to house illegal aliens in it. Talk about putting Americans last. You're putting these kids out of an education because you can't control the border. Biden has failed in this endeavor. He has not taken care that the laws of this country be faithfully executed. Do not trust Nikki Haley with illegal immigration. That's like having the fox guard the hen house. She's on tape at the Aspen Institute. She'll say she didn't say it. She was chastising conservatives, saying it's disrespectful to illegal aliens to say that they're criminals. They're violating the law. It's disrespectful when people come to this country illegally and impose burdens on our communities and run drugs into this country. That's what's disrespectful. She's weak on immigration. She's bankrolled by people who want open borders. And she said there shouldn't be a limit on immigration. You should work with corporate CEOs.
Thanks, Governor.
That is pale pastels. That
Governor,
is warmed over
thank you so much. So,
corporatism.
Governor Ham.
Pretty good answer.
Pretty strong answer.
Hey, well done. And he actually connected to a local story. That story is true, and it's not the only one.
The one about the school in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that.
Legit.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. People kind of said it was lackluster, and it was lackluster compared to when Vivek was in there, to be honest with my boy. But there was some good back and forth on the substantive policy issues as well as them attacking each other, because this is this phase we're at now. We're about to get down to real votes, real delegates for who's going to get to the number to actually become the Republican presidential candidate. And now they have to really start pulling out the knives to try to separate out themselves from each other and get a non-Trump vote together.
Yeah, we're 3 days out.
Yep.
All this is coming to a headway now.
Yep.
So if the conjecture is that these two end up on a ticket together, people just forget that Ron
always do.
DeSantis says you can't trust Nikki Haley on immigration,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah.
Yep.
They always do, right?
It seems that way.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to some extent.
You heard how Chris Christie was talking about the two people that he was running against, right? It's just like, she's not very good. It wasn't the return on investment that I got. And, he called me up.
That was in private. Supposedly supposed to be.
So behind the scenes, these guys are never as, the invective is a lot of theater. Often, not all the time. Like sometimes people legit hate each other.
Yeah, I think Vivek and Nikki Haley actually hate each other.
Yeah, right. It does happen, and when it does happen, it's usually along ideological lines. And I don't think there's actually that much daylight between Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley ideologically.
Yeah,
they're basically the same Republican brand, functionally.
I think Ron has more ideals that he actually believes in, where I'm not convinced Nikki really believes in much at all. Like, she is just wherever the money is swaying her to believe in, like whatever the donors. DeSantis has changed positions because of donors, I think, or been wishy-washy because of donors. But I actually think he has general basic beliefs about the Constitution and stuff that is much more in line with the conservative ethos, where Nikki, I think she is much more opportunistic in a sense. That is my read of them if I was to psychoanalyze the two. But that being said, they are both kind of controlled by the same system in a sense.
Well, and definitely responding, maybe not controlled, but at least responding to the same incentives.
Yeah.
Right. So she got a chance to answer on immigration too. And I think this is another important kind of part of the dynamism that we're going to see over the next year.
Donald Trump are attacking you for that comment in 2015 in which you said undocumented immigrants should not be called, quote, criminals. At the time, the full context is you said, quote, we don't need to talk about them as criminals. They're not. They're families that want a better life and they're desperate to get here, unquote. Do you still feel that way?
I saw them. When I was at the United Nations, I saw them. That doesn't mean we should let them into our country. I mean, first of all, I will tell you that when I was governor of South Carolina, we passed the toughest illegal immigration law in the country. Obama sued us over it, and we won. We fought Obama on illegal immigration. We fought Obama on migrant kids. We fought Obama on Syrian refugees. We fought Obama on Guantanamo Bay prisoners. I have always said we are a country of laws. The second we stop being a country of laws, we give up everything this country was founded on. But I will tell you, in passing that toughest illegal immigration law in the country, we passed E-Verify, which I want to take national, which is where businesses have to prove that the people they hire are in this country legally. I passed it within 6 months of being governor. Ron didn't pass it for 5 years. He only waited to pass it when he decided to run for president. What we need to do is not just ban a wall. We need to put 25,000 Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. We need to defund sanctuary cities once and for all. No more safe havens for illegal immigrants. We need to make sure we go back to the Remain in Mexico policy so that no one even steps foot on U.S. soil. And instead of catch and release, we need to go to catch and deport. That's the only way we'll stop the incentives of these illegal immigrants coming across. Biden turned around and gave 500,000 Venezuelans temporary protective status. That's 500,000 driver's licenses, 500,000 social security numbers. All that does is incentivize them to pick up the phone, call their family members, and tell them to come
Governor
ahead.
DeSantis.
She did bring, when she was governor, she did bring Syrian refugees, and she got criticized for that.
That is not
she
true.
Also, in her comment,
Hold on one second, Governor.
DeSantis lies,
We'll
Doug.
give you your turn in a second. Governor DeSantis.
It's noted. So
She called him a liar a ton throughout the thing. She's just like, "You're a liar. You're a liar." I'm like, it was just constant.
Her entire Twitter account was just that.
Yeah.
Too during it.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Just
Yeah.
posting what, like sources to the things he said that
No,
weren't
it's
true?
just basically like DeSantis is a liar, like
Really?
over and over again. Yeah.
What is that? DeSantislies.com. I want to know.
I haven't looked at the website.
Bring it
We
up.
can
Let's
pull
check
it
out
up here.
DeSantislies.com. Let's do it
No.
live. Do it live.
Welcome to Ron DeSantis' world of lies.
DeSantislies.com.
Let's find out.
Okay. Documented lies.
World of lies. The more Ron DeSantis loses, the more he lies.
Get the facts about Ron DeSantis' latest lies about Nikki Haley's record and his own.
Ooh.
Gaza refugees, energy policy, China subsidies, Haley's China record, Confucius Institutes, Hillary Clinton.
China.
What's the Hillary Clinton? DeSantis falsely claims Hillary Clinton is Nikki Haley's role model.
I gotta say, their fashion sense
What's the
very
truth
similar.
here? DeSantis is distorting Haley's comments. Fact checkers denounce DeSantis lies. Oh, they use fact checkers. Oh. They did a lot of heaters.
But what DeSantis is probably doing is she probably like
it's because she's running as I'm the woman in the race. That's
Yes.
what he means,
Yes.
and that's factually true. I mean, her first comments were, "If you want a real problem to solve it, have a woman solve it." It's like, you come on,
really,
come on,
Really?
and not to mention the whole Vivek thing, which we've covered.
Yep,
absolute bullshit. Go actually to the bottom. Let's see what's paid for by.
Paid for by Nikki Haley.
Oh,
for
okay,
president.
actually a campaign product. Interesting.
Okay. Well, if you want to know all the reasons that Ron DeSantis is full of shit, DeSantislies.com.
From Nikki's perspective.
From Nikki Haley's
I don't know. I think that was a grain of salt. All right. So that I think so. Part of that is the immigration debate is going to be a major theme. I mean, obviously, I've wanted to cover it on our show because there's always like this trickle of immigration stuff going on, but it's never like really rose to the top out of all the orders of stuff, and we really need to do some kind of systematic like breakdown of it at some point because it's one
of those things where I kind of hate the conversation because I feel like all of the talking points around it are very surface level and there's so much nuance that exists there, and everything kind of just comes into this like closed border versus open border where it's like really the conversation is so much more nuanced than that, and everybody's not really like giving policy, like real policy prescriptions anywhere. I always stay away from the immigration debate because of that. It's always a frustrating topic to me.
But it is going to be a major topic this year, no doubt. I mean, Trump is going to bring it to the forefront. Obviously, the Republican debate's going to continue to rise on it because it is a major issue. It's just a background issue that always is just there, right?
Yeah.
Well, and especially when we have the the Ashley St. Clair story that broke, and James O'Keefe has been doing a lot of coverage on it now with these undocumented immigrants on planes with like trash bags going through and buses.
They actually did a chase sequence where James O'Keefe is like chasing a bus down around town. Did you see this?
Yeah, like
I didn't see it.
Oh my
the
God,
buses
it's wild.
transporting the like these immigrants are like trying to flee journalists and stuff.
Yeah.
Was there a video? I've just heard people talking about it. I haven't seen the video.
Yeah, the video is pretty wild. It's a long one. It's like a 20-minute
high-speed migrant bus chase.
Yeah. Real thing. So we should definitely do some coverage on that here soon.
Yeah, there's also there's a broad conversation about this that we were kind of talking about in the Discord too, of how boring the debate is and how anti-charismatic. They're against charisma. How non-charismatic a lot of these traditional political figures feel to me. Like, do you guys feel
just
that
in
way?
general, or
Just
on
in
the immigration issue?
No, just in general across the board. Like in this debate, how boring it was. I watched the debate highlight, and it's just like there's just nothing there.
You know, I think it's a little tough when you've come from a paradigm of like Trump, and then you've also got Vivek, who are very, like, I would say, animated, high energy people. You might feel a little let down by the establishment candidates.
But it's not just this year either, though. It's like it's seemed this way since 2000. Like when I think back, I think of Reagan types and Clinton types. They're very smooth, very charismatic, telling good stories. It didn't seem as canned as it is. And then it's like something in the 2000s happened where all of our political figures just got like so non-charismatic. Obama's maybe an exception, maybe a reason why he rose, because he was like a good orator, right?
Yeah.
But all of these people, it's like Y2K happened, and it's like all of a sudden the charisma's gone. Maybe that's when the lizards took over. I don't know.
CERN. I don't know. It's a good question, because if you look at like the Bush versus Gore debates, they're highly rigid and policy wonkish and like nuanced. It's actually pretty good. Like you watch it, you're like, wow, they were like doing some stuff. Like they're really debating how to think about different foreign policy, domestic issues, and things like that to a much finer degree. And there wasn't nearly as much attacking each other. It was much more civil than our current era.
Was there a shift with regard to think tanks and different policy organizations bringing more ideas to candidates to represent around that time?
I don't think so. I mean,
that's always kind of been the paradigm.
Yeah. I mean,
actually, what it sounds like you're looking for is something that I'm not looking for.
What do you mean?
Because I was saying that there's just like a lack of when I think of Bush v. Gore, that's also very non-charismatic. That's what it seems
I
to
agree
be
with
where
it.
it started.
I'm saying just in that period, that's what that looked like.
Yeah.
But if you look at like Dole versus Clinton, Clinton is a charming Southern drawl candidate, and Dole was super boring, right? George Bush Sr. boring. You know, so I don't really know. I can't really tell you.
It's even just like the senators,
lame.
the senators, the Congress people. I don't know. Like everything just feels so more canned and rigid.
I think part of it is that, especially looking at it from how we talked about it as political scientists when I was going to college, was that there was a moment where media penetration into the campaign was so deep. Wow, that was really
deep penetration. Heard it here first, folks.
I just meant like trackers became a thing. The amount of accountability you can get, how viral something could get, really started to, even before the internet was as big as it is now, begin to change the incentives to like push a more polished front forward, because you could have a singular gaffe that would absolutely ruin you.
Right.
Like the thing, like the
the Howard Dean
Howard
moment.
Dean is a good example, right? He's at a thing, and we should have that be one of the sounds.
That should absolutely be on the soundboard.
Is where he's at a thing, he's at a New Hampshire, and he just lost. He got like second or third. And he's saying, well, we're going to go to these other places. We're going to pick it up.
We're
He's
going to
trying
go
to hype
to New
the crowd.
Hampshire. Then we're going to go to Ohio. And we're going to go to, and we're going to go here. And we're going to go here. And you just, you try to be this rallying cry.
People that don't know what we're talking about,
translate.
This is the famous Howard Dean moment. That
you can see you can see where it is. Look at the where the viewers tune in on the timeline. Right there.
If you're watching us on video,
but I think we need the build up to it.
Yeah,
let's get a little build up.
The Howard Dean moment.
You know something?
He's in Iowa currently.
If you had told us 1 year ago that we were going to come in third in Iowa, we would have given anything for that. And you know something? Not only are we going to New Hampshire, Tom Harkin, we're going to South Carolina and Oklahoma and Arizona and North Dakota and New Mexico. And we're going to California and Texas and New York. And we're going to South Dakota and Oregon and Washington and Michigan. And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House.
Which is such a kind of an innocuous thing when you watch it in that context.
It's totally reasonable.
It does not matter at all.
But the internet got a hold of that, and it was everywhere.
It became
and they
a meme.
Mocked him. They got into the Chappelle show. It was like, and he was doing like it got into a different level of orbit. I think it created a perverse incentive for a lot of polish. That has then resulted in like that push has an equal and opposite push back culturally. So as you push more polish, you get a authenticity gap.
Yeah.
Where people are actually looking for a blah moment. They're looking for someone who will act like a human, right? Where he's like everyone knows how hard public speaking is. So when you see a guy like trying to hype up a crowd and he goes, "Yeah," you know, you kind of go like, "Oh, okay, that's funny now." But back then it was just like, what is this guy doing? You know, like it was a different moment. We had different expectations for candidates, and we had different like relationship to politics because we didn't have the authenticity gap.
Yes.
That people were trying to fill in.
Prior to that point, you had a bit of cover from the fact that you were only really judged through the lens of mainstream media. And that was the way that people got news. But as social media became huge, every single thing you did became scrutinized in a whole different way. And it shifted the way that campaigns had to be run to protect candidates from moments like that. Yeah. If you are a small business owner looking for exponential growth, you have to connect with Adam Thuen at Intellectual Patriots. He will revolutionize your business game and help you get to the next level. Adam can streamline your business practices and advertising strategies to improve your bottom line. His expertise in data engineering means he can build you the systems you need to collect and analyze market data. His mission is to provide you with invaluable insights to fuel your success, from grant writing and business proposals to digital systems integrations, even AI management. Intellectual Patriots is a one-stop shop for cutting-edge solutions. Don't wait another second. Visit intelpatriots.com to learn more. That's INTEL patriots.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Zesty Beverages. They're on a mission to the standard American diet by crafting drinks with fewer calories and more nutrients from real food. Their lineup of delicious offerings now includes Electric Peak Yerba Mate, postbiotic sodas, keto-friendly, ready-to-drink margaritas, and hard teas. Wondering what a postbiotic soda is? Well, head on over to zestybev.com to learn more and find a retailer near you. Once again, check them out online at zestybev.com. That's ZESTYBEV.com.
So Vivek, because he was not invited to the CNN debate, he decided to do his own thing with Timcast, where he showed up, brought the Timcast crew out, I think is what you said, Kyle. I'm actually wasn't sure about that.
Judging by I was assuming, because I knew that this was coming, I saw all of the Timcast crew members posting pictures on X of them on a private jet. So I was assuming that
it's not Tim's jet.
I'm pretty. I have a feeling it was Vivek bringing them out.
Sign up on the Substack so Joe can get his own jet. Anyway, so
we'd love a jet. Thanks.
Nikki Haley, what this is him responding to what Nikki Haley represents. I thought it was an interesting action. What he would have said had he been at the debates. But he doesn't have to wear a tie. He can dress down.
Yeah, he just looks like Joe.
He looks like Joe.
Now, I just want to comment on this guy's fashion sense here because
he did comment on Nikki Haley's.
Absolutely perfect, spot on. Couldn't imagine.
I don't know. Kind of washes him out from the background.
A more everyman, a more relatable attire for Vivek than this. Dropping into the background a little bit, he could use a backlight, perhaps purple. I like purple, but I think overall really good.
Maybe
9 out of 10.
Maybe dye his hair a little. Get a little red swoosh in there.
You know what? I'm not going to tell the guy what to do with his hair.
Grow out the beard, take out that shadow.
Maybe a little bit of beard might help him. Define that jaw a little bit.
But speaking of, this is something that I've noticed, and this seems to be true in political culture and corporate culture in general, is we're starting to see more of a casualness returning. And I think there are a subset of people. I don't think everybody. I think a lot of people want their politicians to still be suited up and kind of represent like the fancy man at the church kind of a thing. Because that's all our Washington D.C. is, the church, and we send our fancy men there, right? But you end up having this guy who's a lot more, I think, authentic representation here, and that's what the black tea, I think, has, right? Joshi,
I'm just getting the Vivek
authentic representation. You are the everyman.
That's right.
All right. So yeah, here is Vivek talking about Nikki.
I was trying to figure out for a long time. It didn't feel like it was going to be a Trump versus Biden race. There's a lot with Biden. You got the documents case coming out. Why are they trotting that against Biden after like 10 years? Hunter Biden. Okay, we could have talked about it. Now suddenly it's gaining credibility. Didn't feel like it was going to be Biden. So I think incorrectly assumed that it was going to be Gavin Newsom or somebody else as the new puppet other than Biden they want to trot out. And I think what became increasingly clear is that they've actually found a much more convenient new puppet. A puppet who actually can give them a lot of air cover by being within the Republican Party or the guise of the Republican Party itself. And that's Nikki Haley, of course. The very people who are paying to keep Trump off the ballot in lawsuits like Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, or even Larry Fink, the king of the woke industrial complex, the leader of BlackRock. Look at who they're supporting. It's not Gavin Newsom. It's not Joe Biden. It's Nikki Haley, actually.
And so what they want to do, to put it in plain sight, is to make this a two-horse race between Donald Trump and a puppet who they can control. I believe that's Nikki Haley. Eliminate Trump from contention, and then trot in their controllable puppet into the White House. That's the game that's hiding in plain sight, and I think everybody's falling for it, actually.
I don't think they're falling for it. I think it's odd every time we look at the polls or the news organizations. They keep telling us Nikki is surging, and it's so obvious if you speak to people that she's not. After every single debate, they're like, Nikki won, even when it's so obvious. She's not even third place in terms of who won, and they're trying to convince us. It's
every time,
a full propaganda effort when it comes to Nikki Haley, and you're right.
I think the part
it's pretty sinister what they're doing.
Yeah, so he brought Candace Owens with him, which is also interesting, right? And doing a bunch of events with her at the events, running around Iowa, which is, I mean, she's an internet celebrity, internet candidate, young person's candidate. I mean, it leans into his strengths, and obviously
conservatives love her.
Conservatives love her, yeah.
Quite true.
Yeah, it's a good move. One of the things here is Vivek's model for how to think about politics, I think, is interesting, and it's why Reason doesn't like him, right? He sees politics as you have the establishment is out there doing something, that there's an interest group of people who are trying to do a thing versus people who are actually trying to do it the way it's supposed to be done, which is real people with real ideas trying to gain leadership. It's a group of people who are like, we're going to select and push for our candidates to get there. Obviously, something that everyone wants to do, but there's a group of people who want to do that, and they are wealthy and bought into interest groups that benefit from the status quo, benefit from a large military, active military, benefit from the current situation with the way we relate to finance and the Fed and our incentives when it comes to such things, and that those people are trying to select a candidate. Now, if you don't believe that, what's your model, right? How do you explain politics in a way that isn't completely naive? And I think that's one of the reasons why he's taking off so well, is he's trying to pierce that veil, but it's also why he's getting a lot of pushback.
Well, and I think there's also an element too. There's a lot of useful idiots in politics, and Lenin talks about this all the time. Soviet dictator. He knows a thing or two about useful idiots, I think. And a lot of people don't realize that they're puppets, and a lot of people kind of think that they're just individuals, but they're part of a culture. And that culture matters. And that culture is pushing something towards a direction, and it is influencing people subconsciously. And a lot of these people, and this is, I think, where the reason people often go wrong. I tend to agree with the reason people on policy, like 90% of the time usually. But when it comes to their understanding of political culture, that's where I think that they get things wrong. And it's because I think that they are very embedded, not even like, they don't even like realize that they're part of it, but they're embedded in that DC culture, and they don't even realize the influences that are kind of pushing them in certain directions of their thoughts. That's the way I tend to look at this thing.
I think it's a little easier to see too. When you're from a flyover state, you're not part of elite culture, not part of the Manhattan Club. There's also when we say Reason people, we're talking about his Reason magazine, to be clear. You guys not know about all the Discord talking that goes on.
An example of this is there was an article that they put out a few days ago on the 10th saying, farewell to Chris Christie, the lone candidate in the Republican race with the courage to directly challenge Donald Trump.
Farewell, Chris. Goodbye.
And
you served our country well.
And it's, the thing is, it's true. He did challenge Donald Trump, but you're kind of like missing the forest for the trees here.
Well, in the broader context, for those that don't know what Reason is it's widely known as sort of a libertarian publication, right?
It's the biggest one. It has a lot of respect too, right?
But within libertarianism, there are different sort of value sets, factions, right? And they're sort of more of the mainstream beltway libertarians, as we sort of put it, right? The DC blob libertarians, if you will.
That's how they're attacked by the opposition. They're critics within that movement.
Well,
right?
so
they wouldn't say that about themselves, of course.
Well, of course not. But how would you perceive
conspiracy theorists?
Something like that statement about Chris Christie, who is not in any way a libertarian?
It's Trump derangement syndrome. It's just saying that Trump is bad, and they're trying to praise him for the thing that they agree with him on. There are good reasons to criticize Trump.
Sure.
Right. It's just strange to use this as an opportunity to platform on that when Chris Christie is so repugnant to your values, probably by a lot of people's assessment, more so than Trump is.
Right. And if you're trying to communicate to a base of libertarians who would perceive Chris Christie as not someone to really be revered in any way, politically or ideologically, you wouldn't be as reverent about the way you were sending him off.
Yeah.
Per se, right?
But and they tend to be very reverent to people that I think that should not be reverent to often.
Which begs the question:
often,
who are they communicating to? If
and
not
then critical of
libertarians?
others, right? They've been very critical of Vivek for saying, for example, that January 6th was an inside job,
right?
When it obviously was an inside job. Hold on. It obviously was, because an inside job is where you have someone on the inside of a bank who helps the guys get into the bank. And we have video, and I've seen it with my own eyes, and I wanted someone to understand and convince me why it wasn't with my own eyes of a guard saying, hey, come on in. Like, we've seen the video. Like, don't lie to me and tell me I didn't see the video. I'm not a crazy person.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the guy hearing Yiddish in his basement over here. I'm watching the video happen on January 6th. The people of guards just standing around watching people, not stopping them, and then being like, or opening doors and
Not
things
just
like this.
that, yeah, touring people through the Capitol.
Or removing barriers and waving people towards the Capitol.
Right.
I mean, I'm repeatedly seeing this, and then I'm told it's a violent insurrection, and it's a crazy idea that the FBI was there when the FBI can't tell me that they weren't. I mean, come on. Or that they don't have agent provocateurs.
Yeah.
When I see video of guys who look a hell of a lot like an agent provocateur.
And Vivek had a great answer on this issue that I heard him say in some sort of campaign event in Iowa. Yeah. Basically saying all of those things, like you're telling me that I'm not supposed to say this was an inside job, when really there was a Capitol officer who waved somebody in, and that guy who was waved in actually won his court case in his January 6th court hearing based on that evidence.
This podcast on Timcast too, they literally started the podcast with Tim reading off the definitions of inside job.
Oh, yeah.
he was like from Merriam-Webster's inside job, and
that's where it was that I heard it.
Yeah.
Actually, it was on this show.
Yeah.
You're right. Thank you.
And he's like, because the corporate press will be here, he kind of does the Trump thing and is like, they're in the back because they showed up to the event as well, which is funny.
Radical left.
Funny symbolically that you end up having the corporate press having to go in and cover a live show from a podcast. Kind of funny.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that in the beginning there.
Interesting.
I enjoy that dynamic.
Pivotal moments.
The flippening. The flippening is about to happen.
It's happening. So this next clip from there is talking about the VP thing, because a lot of people, even Elon, just yesterday, somebody asked, would you support Vivek for VP? And Elon responded yes, and everybody's like, oh, Elon would do
really?
Yeah, but that's so much part of the conversation right now. Everybody's just like, I'm really becoming more impressed with Vivek. I want him to be VP. That's always the thing. I want him to be VP. I want him to be VP, right? But here's his response to that from the podcast.
Scenario: Donald Trump wins the primary. He comes right on out and says, Vivek Ramaswamy, you are my vice president. What do you say?
Donald Trump wins you're saying Donald Trump wins the primary and then that. So I think we just have to have an honest conversation. I mean, if that's the scenario we're in, that's not what I'm playing for, but if that's what we're in, I have an inconvenient attribute, which is that I have opinions. I have strong opinions about things. I'm not somebody who really, rolls over or whatever. But what I've said is Donald Trump has my full support if he's the nominee. And I expect his full support if I'm the nominee. But I don't think we get to that place. That's the whole premise of when you think it's Gavin Newsom or Joe Biden as the puppet, you think you might get to that place. I don't think they want Biden or Newsom. I think Nikki is a far more reliable pawn for the system with respect to the two things they care about most, which is keeping the foreign war machine humming, far more reliable on places from the Middle East to Ukraine. She's far more hawkish than actually anybody in the Democratic side. And with respect to the national security state, I don't think Joe Biden could have come up with the idea if he tried to tie every social media account and internet account with a government-issued ID. So I don't think it goes there, Tim. I think where it goes is they want this late in the primary, and then they get the air cover because the Democratic Party's brand isn't doing too hot. The permanent state is fundamentally nonpartisan at its core. So they get the air cover of saying, oh, yeah, we weren't even doing the Democrat game where most of the Republican base watching cable news thinks it's about beating Biden. They're missing the plot. That's what's going on.
I think he's got a good point there, where the play is not even actually trying to win as a Democrat for anyone, because, well, I don't think that the Democratic Party has a candidate that can really win very well in this climate. I think the power on the right is too much. So the system's best effort to maintain its own control is to put up a candidate within the Republican Party that they can actually manipulate. And Nikki Haley does seem like a pretty good empty suit, as we've talked about throughout the course of this show. Maybe doesn't have a lot of her own ideas, right? Doesn't really know why the Civil War started. Maybe doesn't really know 3 provinces in Ukraine.
She knows why the Civil War started. She's from the South. She can't say it because she's a political hack. Right?
Yeah,
that's why.
Okay, fair, but doesn't have the fortitude to put her own opinions forward because she's beholden to other things that are more important to her.
Well, it also showcases right, left, Republican, Democrat doesn't necessarily matter. These are vehicles for transmitting ideas into the political system, or transmitting power influence into the political system. And the people that really want to get things done, the people that are like power players and they're looking at the geopolitics as a chessboard and things like that, the big billionaires, the big kind of major think tank operators, they don't necessarily look at the game as like, oh, Republicans need to win or Democrats need to win. It's, we need to get certain things across, and we are going to find whichever avenue makes the most sense from a game theory perspective. And right now, the game theory perspective seems to be co-opt the right. Mm-hmm. in some manner. Yeah. Get rid of the big orange dude that's very bombastic and just kind of throwing bombs at everything, metaphorical bombs, like at the walls and kind of uncovering what's behind the curtain, right? Mm-hmm. Get rid of him, prop up somebody that can take his place. Maybe we can co-opt the MAGA movement a little bit and throw some pleasantries that way. I think that happened with the Tea Party a lot. There's a lot of figures that came in through the Tea Party that were supposed to be these like, yes, less spending, all these stuff, like kind of the Marco Rubios of the world.
Yeah, like Ted Cruz and stuff.
Although Ted Cruz is still pretty.
He's better.
He's more of a gangster of the Tea Party than like Marco Rubio, who's largely
Paul Ryan, people like that.
Largely gave up the ghost on that stuff.
Yeah.
Although I think Paul Ryan actually precedes the Tea Party, but still, like it's that sort of like we were going to be a new conservative wave that largely got let down, and largely because the Tea Party got eaten by fundraisers and fund spenders who basically scammed a tremendous amount of grassroots activists out of money and support, and basically just did nothing with it.
Well, and this isn't new either. Like this is the Rothbardian argument on what Buckley was in the National Review types. We kind of covered who Buckley was in the past on a previous episode, but and kind of what I was talking about is people think that they think of the Republican Party as this other era. They're thinking about the Buckley era and where the more neocon influence happened. That was, in my opinion, co-opting. That is kind of this similar dynamic right here.
The most obvious way to see it is watch Bill Kristol be a Democrat, turn into a Republican, work in Republican administrations, see Donald Trump become a Democrat again, and everyone just kind of goes like, look at that. Like no one goes like, that's strange. And like no one goes like, that's really weird. Like people don't really do that. Like you never saw Rush Limbaugh just become a Democrat one day.
It's almost as if no one expects Bill Kristol to actually have principles.
Well, he has principles.
Oh yeah.
But partisan principles.
He has a principle. It is bomb all the brown people in the Middle East. That is his principle.
That's it.
Turn the Middle East into a sheet of glass.
It's like the Rick and Morty when they're doing the debates, and it's just like more nukes. Like that's it. Like, and it's you could answer the questions. Like, nope, I've answered the question. Like that.
And it's his thing is my party is the party that's willing to bomb more. That is his party, and he will switch parties. If the Libertarian Party wanted to start bombing everybody in the Middle East, he'd be like, I'm a Libertarian now, guys. Right? Like that's what it would be.
Yeah.
That's wild.
No, it isn't. Libertarians put forward a Raytheon lobbyist at one point. So it could be
the Gary Johnson's VP. What's his name? The dude from Ohio.
Bill Weld.
Bill Weld.
He's a Raytheon executive.
And then he left, endorsed Hillary Clinton, and then afterwards was like on TV saying, oh, Donald Trump has committed treason. And you know what the punishment for treason is? Is death. Like, this was the Libertarian candidate,
Wild.
right? Or the VP candidate.
Could you imagine that there's a group of people who are like, I'm so surprised by the Mises Caucus takeover the LP. I'm so surprised by this. After that happened.
Yeah,
imagine why.
Think about that. Yeah. Speaking of which, we do have a bunch of studies that are like polling that have come out about third parties. And I probably should have put this in. I'll put it into the group Discord that you guys should check out. There's a bunch of new stuff about willingness to vote third party and kind of like a growth of a third party block. It's very interesting stuff, especially when it comes to RFK Jr. and him running for third party. The LP basically not having anything real put together despite being one of the only parties that's on the ballot in 50 states. And then the Green Party putting forth, is a college professor. Really like him. It's, oh man, I'm spacing his name right now.
Dean Phillips.
No, he's a Democrat.
He's Democrat.
No. Oh man, how can I forget his name?
I got it. It is.
The black activist.
Howie Hawkins.
Yeah.
Howie Hawkins.
No.
Cornell West.
Cornell West.
Yes, Cornell West.
Okay.
He's like the Milton Friedman of the left.
That's a good way.
That's the way I always describe him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like the charismatic intellectual that everybody kind of looks to in the same way that conservatives look at Milton Friedman.
And just a joy to listen to. Even as I completely disagree with him on everything, I just like listening to the guy. He's so kind and just an upstanding fellow.
So you're saying with the current options that exist, more people are willing to vote third party than have ever before been willing to do so.
Yeah, people are staring down the barrel of a Biden versus Trump presidential election again, and they're like, there's some interesting polling on this. It is still early. We'll see how it actually shakes out.
That was the thing is All In podcast, which I know Joe and I both listen to quite a bit. They put out their political predictions. They did a whole prediction episode of like predictions for the year. Mm-hmm. And that was Friedberg's prediction was that this is going to be the year that we see the beginnings, not an actual, but the beginnings of the rise of an actual third party. And there's going to be legitimate conversation around like, what do we name it? What do we do because that is kind of the problem, in my opinion, of the Libertarian Party is the name. People get kind of libertarian. I don't know what that means, but if you gave it like if you gave a third party a solid name that people can get behind and people can left curve really hard and be like, I like it. I don't like those things. I like this.
What does Green Party mean though?
Same thing. It has no viability because it's too singular focused.
You like green.
Yeah.
It's like, what about green? You like money?
I like turtles.
The environment?
I like turtles. I like grass. But because that is, how do we market it? Like, I think that there's going to be like legitimate donor dollars that start to go towards third party funding. And we're going to see the beginnings of it in some meaningful fashion. I think the Libertarian Party has its use case. The problem is, I actually think the Libertarian Party might be too idealistic. And that's why they can't go anywhere.
No,
it's too.
You don't say.
It's too focused on wonky libertarianism, right?
Obviously.
Yeah. Sorry, Liam.
But it actually has to mean something too. Anyways, let's jump over. So Trump also was in the news on Fox. He got a chance to respond to a bunch of stuff while being attacked by nobody, right? So he has like press people asking him questions about his record,
right?
And I think it's an important component of the dialogue that we're going to have going into the presidential election, where you have completely different channels. So that will have an interesting thing. You have the Fox channel, you have the CNN channel with the other three candidates, and then you have the internet channel with the Vivek. So we'll see how it shakes. But this is him responding to $8 trillion in deficit spending.
Just hit you again and again on this $8 trillion figure and call you a big government Republican.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
I say very simply, we were starting to pay down debt. We were going to pay down a lot of debt. When COVID came along, if I didn't inject this country with money, you would have had a depression, the likes of which you've never seen. You had to inject money. We gave businesses that were going bankrupt, temporarily bankrupt, but they needed money. We helped businesses. If I didn't do that, you would have had a depression in this country. That was a very good investment. And now what they should be doing, instead of the kind of debt that they're building at record levels, they should be paying down their debt, and they ought to go into the energy business instead of this green new scam business that they're in.
But what about the future? What about cutting spending? $34 trillion in debt. Let's look at what you would do in terms of getting that number down. What would you get rid of?
We have a lot of cutting, but we also have a lot of income. We have more liquid gold under our feet, energy, oil and gas, than any other country in the world, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia. And when I came in, we were number 4. When I left, not that long a period of time, 4 years, we were number 1 by a lot. And we were soon going to double up Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. And we were going to make a lot of money. We have a lot of potential income. DeSantis wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. Nikki Haley wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. Nikki Haley wanted to raise the age from 65 to 74, 75,
but
or 70.
But only for young people in their 20s. That's going to run out of money.
That's what they say.
So at some point, someone has to address it, right?
That's what they say when it starts. They say only for young people. It's only for young people. And then it doesn't work for young people, and they end up getting up to people that are where it matters.
I'm going to be honest. I didn't pay attention to a word he said. I was just sitting here making Trump hand gestures the whole time.
I don't know if you could see if Bennett will decide to show it or not, but we were all just doing this the whole time.
Bennett, do what you want with that.
So the question is what is, and this is just another way to attack on, and this I think is going to be a major part of any serious challenge to Donald Trump, is what is the Republican vision that actually works backwards and was actually true then, that's true today, for how to respond to the pandemic. Do you actually believe in Keynesianism or not? Because what he just did was Keynesianism, pure up Keynesianism. Like if you don't print dollars and you keep the flywheel of the economy, which according to Keynes was consumption, going, then you're going to have a recession, and that's bad. When the free market, Milton Friedman, even to Austrian view, has largely been that the flywheel of the economy is production. And so if you shut down production, you should expect a recession, and that's actually a good thing because you want to reconcile with reality, right? Instead of patching over reality with a bunch of, inflation spending, which has now created this inflationary environment we're in today, where you've shut down the economy, print a bunch of dollars, and now have this huge problem that we have today. As news yesterday, inflation's ticked back up again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is Trump maybe should have not printed $8 trillion in response to the COVID pandemic, thinking that, okay, we can just artificially stimulate consumer spending by giving people all this money, injecting all this money into the economy, creating the inflation that we're seeing today.
And he should have shut down the government rather than allow the Republicans to cut taxes without cutting spending. He could have done that in 2017, and it would have been completely justified in doing so. I mean, it was absurd for them to do what they did. Intentionally increasing the deficit in a time when he's literally trying to pull back troops from the Middle East and do all these other things, and then say, oh, what we need to do is increase all the budgets even more while we also cut taxes. Now, receipts actually increased over that time, but just not as fast as their increased spending.
Wow.
So it's actually absurd.
So Trump really is a big government Republican.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it's just like it's more that he missed opportunities to do better, right? These are criticisms. I don't think this was his vision per se. It's a complicated thing, right? He can't control Congress. Congress was being run by Paul Ryan at the time, right? Who was supposedly a fiscal conservative, who failed to actually balance the budget, in part because of the Senate. The Senate is controlled by
Democrats?
Mitch McConnell at the time. And Mitch McConnell is a big spending Republican, right? So he has basically has to deal with the two branches of Congress and what they want. So maybe he could have cut a deal with Paul Ryan if he had a decent Senate, but he didn't have that Senate. Right, so we kind of hold him responsible for a Senate that he couldn't control.
Yeah. Sure.
The budget actually comes from Congress, like that's the only constitutional way to do it. Mm-hmm. That said, he also failed to do many steps to actually push the budget process, and he's gotten criticisms from AEI and the National Review and Heritage on those sorts of things. So these are people in his crowd. So I don't think he could have done better, but you can't lay it all at his feet. That said, he did rather than saying, hey, look, CARES Package 1, okay. Care Package 4, we're literally spending millions of dollars bailing out Indiana's pension funds, right? Like Care Package 4, he could have vetoed, right? And he should say, I screwed up, I listened to the wrong people, and move forward. But he's not going to do that.
But he really wanted to say, though, he wanted to say, Indiana, we came for you, we saved you, we helped you, we I did it in a big way. You could not have survived the pandemic without us. Okay.
That's the frustrating thing around the conversations around Trump, because like I think that there are legitimate criticisms. They just are never the criticisms that everybody wants you to, like what people are always mad about Trump is like he says mean things or whatever.
Yeah.
But really the COVID era, I think, are where the most criticisms are deserved of him, because like I'm generally okay with Trump. I kind of like the symbol that he represents. I like the bomb throwing, kind of the veil behind the curtain is like I like that whole thing. But in areas where if I was to get very super nitpicky, it is the lockdowns. It is him criticizing Thomas Massey and calling him a third-rate politician, and that he has to get primaried out because he was the only person that stood against the CARES Act. Right. It's those types of things. I'm like, Trump majorly screwed up on.
Right.
And yeah.
To me, and to be clear, I don't think that DeSantis or Nikki Haley, had they been president in 2020, would have done anything different.
I think they probably would have been worse.
They would have been, they would have done that while we had troops on the ground in Ukraine.
It's hard to know how any candidate would have responded, but I think in retrospect, and knowing kind of the person that Trump is, or the person that he has portrayed himself to be in the public light, there's a degree of the egotism that surrounds him that I think he wanted to be the guy who could take credit for saving X, Y, or Z in regards of that scenario and that crisis that we were in. He wanted to be able to say, I did this for you. I did that for you. And that's such a temptation for any politician who has a big government streak or who has the want to be the person who saves the day.
It's also like it's part of our moment, right? We live in the post-progressive era. It's like people think that Hoover, historical analogy real quick, people think that Hoover was a free market radical when he was a progressive, right? You really read in your history books that Hoover got around and he didn't do anything because he was a free market radical, and that's why the Depression got so bad, because he refused to intervene. Nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, it's not true at all.
He was a giant progressive who intervened in lots of stuff. In fact, a lot of FDR's regime was continuing and doubling down on what FDR did. He just didn't do enough of it, is what FDR said. So it's actually the environment that you're in, and we actually look back and we say, why weren't you different than the environment you were in at the time? And people rarely, very rarely, are actually stand out from their environment. Most people are apples in apple boxes. They're not themselves like completely separated or differentiated from everyone else around them. And that includes a guy like Trump, who's in a situation where he's not an expert. He's not a pandemic expert. He had never thought about this issue. And a lot of people screwed up in this time.
Continuing the Hoover analogy and actually linking it back to the stuff that Vivek was talking about with Nikki Haley and DeSantis, there was a letter that FDR sent out, and it's been forever since I read this, so I'm greatly paraphrasing this, and I might have some things botched out here. But there was a letter that FDR sent out to someone, I can't remember, like one of his political allies, talking about how much of a useful tool Hoover actually was, and FDR calling him kind of an idiot, and having him as like a useful foil that is just going to like bring everything that we want to put forward up to the pedestal. It's interesting how the history of that shook out, where he is this representative of like the free market capitalist when he just wasn't. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And if you want to get into that, Amity Shales, her work on the Great Depression is amazing, an excellent historian, as well as Murray Rothbard's America's Great Depression. So we also have Trump responding to his dictator accusation. We had several clips from people like Whoopi Goldberg go viral this week saying that, when Trump gets in, he's going to be a dictator. And so he got an opportunity to respond.
And I think it's really important, before we play this clip, I think part of the reason why we should and we are going through this stuff is because we haven't been able to hear from Trump at all in these debates leading up to this, because he's elected not to be a part of them. But we do have, the Iowa caucus on Monday. And so people probably should be listening to more of what Trump has to say before they decide, do I want to vote for him or not?
That is the weird thing about Trump. Actually, before we get into the clip, that is an interesting kind of dialogue point, is how little I've actually seen of Trump over the last year. Like, I see little small things here. Some things from Truth Social makes it over to X. But it is weird where it's like people are coming around and coalescing around the symbol that is Trump and not actually seeing anything he's doing over the last year. Like, there's just not that much out there.
Interesting correlation to DeSantis in that way. The pandemic era DeSantis, people didn't get to see him. And then when they didn't see him, it was like, that wasn't exactly what I thought. I don't know. I'm not saying that's going to be the case with
he's
Trump.
just gaining so much traction because the symbol of the rebel going against the system and the system's coming after him. Like that's what people know, but nobody's actually seeing Trump out there doing stuff, right?
And potentially there's a risk that people are recalling the Trump that they knew from 2016 or, that era, 2020, when he was, who he was then. We haven't really seen as much of him recently. So
yeah, when I do see him, he doesn't have the juice he used to have.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't have the juice.
Interesting.
And I think that's the people that feel that way are going to Vivek, and then a lot of people are just like, because
they're kind of
Trump's also 80.
But he's offered this narrative that he is their retribution for getting screwed over
People
in the
are
last
voting for
election cycle,
retribution.
right? And that's sort of been a very interesting dynamic because a lot of people on the left, I think, see that as like kind of a very fearful thing. Like, if he gets elected, like it's going to be chaos. It's going to be he's going to be raining fire on everyone, and the country's going to go to shit, and it's going to be terrible.
He's going to be a dictator.
He's going to be a dictator.
And here's him responding how he's not going to be a dictator.
In recent days, you seem to issue a warning that if in the courts, and even the U.S. Supreme Court, if they didn't treat you fairly, that maybe there would be bedlam in the country. You use that word, bedlam in the country. And in the last 2 days, at the same time, in the last two speeches, President Biden is focusing his campaign on the threat to democracy and political violence. Take a listen.
I'll say what Donald Trump won't. Political violence is never, ever acceptable in the United States political system. Never, never, never.
All right, so to Robert's question, this is clearly a focus of the Biden campaign. So can you say tonight that political violence is never acceptable?
Well, of course that's right. And of course, I'm the one that had very little of it. Take a look at wars. Again, I didn't start. I wasn't involved in wars. We beat the hell out of ISIS. We won 100%. We brought our troops back home. Look at the violence that we've had. Look at the violence we have recently.
Right, but when you say bedlam, what do you mean?
I think you have bedlam. I think you look at Joe Biden, it's bedlam. You have a man who can't lead. You have a man who can't find his way off a stage after he makes a speech that lasts for about 2 minutes. No, I think bedlam is Joe Biden. I think that he's using this. This is just a political ploy. Trump is a dictator. He wants to be a dictator. It's interesting. I did a show, Sean Hannity. Did you ever hear of him? He's a very nice man. And he said essentially, you're not going to be a dictator, are you? Tell me. I think he was trying to give me a nicer question than maybe you guys would. He meant it very well. I said, I'm going to be a dictator for one day. We're going to do two things. The border, we're going to make it so tight you can't get in unless you come in legally. And the other is energy. We're going to drill, baby, drill. After that, I'm not going to be a dictator. After that, I'm not going to be a dictator.
So you weren't saying that if the
and the press picks it up. So I said, I'm going to be a dictator for one day. They cut it. They go, I'm going to be a dictator. But they cut the rest of the sentence. No, I am not going to be a dictator. I'm going to manage like we did. We were so successful that the country was coming together.
Yeah, I mean, then he pivots to his record on the thing. Now, I want to note that political violence during the Trump regime, like in 2016, was substantial. Like, it was a wild year. Like
what is political violence? What's that mean?
Well, what I think of political violence is everything from Antifa and the Proud Boys beating the crap out of each other in the streets to January 6th, right? Like these are all episodes of political violence. Now, how much should Trump own with that? I think relatively little. I think the Proud Boys are a response to
Antifa.
BLM,
in
Antifa,
2015, 2016 is when
yes.
Antifa really had their big rise. And they were like beating people up on college campuses and stuff. Like they were showing up where speakers were going, and like a girl that I knew got hit with a rock on a campus at one point.
Allegedly.
She was a YAL girl from Young Americans for Liberty. It was a college group.
Yeah. We're in a Wear Bitcoin, Make Bitcoin Great Again hat.
Yeah, it was like
just
a
red hat.
Yeah.
And so they accosted her.
Oh,
so yeah, this,
geez.
I mean, that kind of political violence was happening, but I don't see why you would pin it on him. The dictator stuff, obviously he's joking about. Obviously he's saying these are really important issues. It's one of those things where the left hears and they go like, oh, fainting
I was
counts.
shaking.
Oh,
I was shaking.
I was shaking. Exactly.
You got to get that on the soundboard.
Grown
actually.
man. You're a grown man. Anyway, so yeah, obviously it's responding to the left's absurdity, which is actually an opportunity, and people should take advantage of that. He pivots to his foreign policy record, which is mixed, but better than many others. So hey, good job. And I think that there's that it was like the best you can really do with that answer or that question, because it's it should be taken as absurd if you're dealing on the facts, because he didn't stir political violence.
Which,
that's absurd.
Let's just be clear, no one deals in facts anymore. It's all emotion.
Well,
nobody's ever dealt with facts. It's always been emotion.
It's all just cults all the way down, buddy.
People want to think that everything's about facts and logic and rationality.
No.
Study
some human psychology. It's not how humans work.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Oh, man.
All right. So he was then later fact checked by Community Notes on lockdowns on X. I don't know if you guys saw this.
Yeah, and this is just like a very quick clip, and this goes into what we were talking about. Is like there are, in my opinion, legitimate reasons to criticize Trump. It's just all the reasons that people want to criticize him are dumb reasons. It's this stuff that is actually where I am hypercritical of him, and I'm glad Community Notes did fact check here. So here's just a 16-second clip of it, and then we'll.
I'm a federalist in a sense because that's the federalist way. No, I didn't actually have a shutdown, despite the fact that some people wanted to and some people didn't want to. But we had some great governors. The governors that did the best job were Republican governors, and they were the ones that didn't shut down.
Yeah, so him basically saying that shutdowns, he just let everybody decide. Not actually the case. It became the case later, but there was a federal shutdown that he was a part of, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question because he definitely took credit for lockdowns, as it points out here. He did criticize when some states locked down, but was there a federal mandate to shut down? No. North Dakota never shut down. They never had a lawsuit that I'm aware of the federal government coming after them for shutting down. So it is, it is good faith, bad faith. It's hard to say. I mean, but he definitely at times tried to take credit for the pandemic response when he felt like it was
actually, let me correct myself because I actually misspoke. It's the credit aspect. Is that he took credit for this stuff, right? And he's trying to be like, it's kind of out of his hands. I just let people decide. But he actively was taking credit for these things. Yeah. And also, he could have done more with Fauci. He could have not done everything with the CARES Act. Like, there's a lot of things there that exist where he was actively critical of the people that were opposed to the major spending, which I talk about with the Thomas Massie situation all the time. Like, these were areas where I think he made blunders.
Right. And this is where, like, if you're talking as a Trump supporter, most of the folks who are in that space, I think, recognize this and then say, yes, but
he was tricked.
No, he was tricked, or no one else would have done any different, right? Everyone else is like, you're in the swamp. You're gonna make mistakes. Mistakes happen. So, but he's the best guy we got. Totally understand. I think it's a rational position.
I think it's a rational position.
You got to deal with the facts of your time, right? And that is that everyone's an imperfect candidate. So, one more point on the electoral stuff, if you don't mind, which is Michelle Obama might be the Dem candidate. Have you guys seen all this reporting? This started trickling out about 3 months ago, but there was a particular the Democrats' secret plan for Michelle Obama to run.
Big Mike.
This week there was. Did you really? Did you just?
Did I do what?
Wow.
I'm not gonna do it. But so many buttons I want to push.
Yeah, big Mike's secret plan for 2024.
I think Michelle Obama is a woman.
But do you know?
I'm not Joe status. I'm not like I need evidence.
Ellen DeGeneres. 2 words.
All right. So this is another part of that, like the meta game, the minor game, like the thing that's happening in front of you versus what's going to happen behind the scenes. And I think Democrats are looking for a way out of Joe Biden. Difficult to look at a guy who can't put on a jacket as your president. So we could be in that era.
The only people that make sense to me out of known figures right now are Michelle and Newsom. They're the only people that make sense. Like, I can't think of who the bench is right now.
But we are getting very close. Like, Democrat primaries are coming.
Have to decide.
So.
But I did hear an interesting argument. And I suppose it doesn't preclude this from being a possibility, but that the Democratic primary passes, then Biden says, oh, health issues, I can't continue, and then the Dems can just appoint whomever they want.
Yeah.
Right? Versus actually running someone that needs to be elected by the party.
Yeah, then they bring forward a new person who they've probably been grooming behind the scenes a little bit. Like Obama was kind of getting groomed. He was getting a lot of because Obama had a very short stint in public life, but he was getting a lot of the passes of like, you get to be the speaker at the DNC convention, right? And he's just like this no-name person. I think that the parties kind of do this where they kind of start to elevate potential rising stars.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we saw in the 2020 election with a lot of these like Pete Buttigieg and the dude from Texas who the big gun control guy, I can't think of his name, these like young people who just didn't have that charismatic spark that Obama did.
Beto O'Rourke.
Beto O'Rourke, yeah, that's who I'm thinking. Beta.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question, and I will keep an eye on it when it comes as a major news story. But it is out there. What are the Democrats going to do? How's that going to shake out? And if you want evidence about this sort of waiting till after the electoral process is over in order to actually put in who you want through a more authoritarian regime, almost every state Supreme Court works this way.
Explain.
Especially true in Montana, and there's quite a few other states who have followed this pattern, according to people that I've spoken to and are engaged in this regularly, is that many Supreme Courts, basically you run for an election, but then if you leave mid-term, you're appointed by your governor. So what you do is you leave mid-term so that way someone else can be appointed into that position who then can run as incumbent and get incumbency advantages. This happens all the time in politics. This should not be a surprise to anyone who's fluent in how political decisions are made. So the idea that the Democrats might do this, especially the Democrat Party, which is the party of the superdelegate. It is the party of we have special people with special extra votes who get to wield more power. So absolutely. Could it be? But
democracy, David.
Yeah.
Democracy, though.
Right. So the idea that they could be flagging up Michelle Obama as a potential as they're trying to like gather like and kind of dipstick the how much support she has, we could be seeing that, especially with videos like this one that we have of her.
Donald Trump is the wrong president for our country. He has had more than enough time to prove that he can do the job, but he is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. If you take one thing from my words tonight, it is this. If you think things cannot possibly get worse, trust me, they can and they will if we don't make a change in this election.
Now, a couple things to note here. This was a video that she presented at the Democratic National Convention. And when she's kind of threatening that things could get worse, that she is also the producer on a disaster movie, executive producer on a disaster movie on Netflix. So,
which I think I'm the only one on this cast who has watched, actually.
Yeah, pay me to watch that propaganda.
It is. Thank you very much. Pre-programming as well.
What would you think about it? What was it? What was it about?
Well, the movie was called Leave the World Behind. Starred, it was Ethan Hawke and Julia Roberts, and basically a disaster movie about a cyber attack that hits New York City, and then these two families are sort of forced together from opposite racial perspectives, a black family and a white family, and they have to grapple with their conflict, their racial conflict, most prominently, to survive this kind of apocalyptic scenario where regular life is turned upside down, and there's all sorts of different symbolism and imagery and stuff that's prevalent throughout. We don't need to go into all of it unless we want to do like a real deeper dive into it, but it really does end up sort of framing certain groups of people certain ways. The survivalist guy in the movie played by Kevin Bacon is like very sort of, comes off as sort of xenophobic and protectionist and like, I'm here for my own and I'm not going to let you, take our medicine. They go to him for medicine, right? And we're not going to give you what you need to survive because I'm looking out for my people.
Right.
Anyway, it was very sort of fearful, fear-mongering, propagandistic sort of just around the whole idea that maybe, a cyber attack is imminent. And that's sort of what I took from it as sort of this pre-programming perspective that like, oh, like something like this might be on the horizon. We should be afraid. Which, you know, maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
If a cyber attack does happen on scale, that would be very bad. Right?
It'd be crazy.
Oh, it'd be terrible for sure. Yeah,
like we make our income on the internet. So
yeah,
we'd be on ham radio pretty quick.
We're moving to a completely different world if that happens. Did you guys? This was just making me think because we're talking about media and influencing people. Did you guys see the Martin Scorsese? Is going to be making a movie about Jesus, and they are making all the cast female. They're gonna gender bend Jesus.
So Jennifer Lawrence has been cast as
Jesus Christ.
Emma Stone is Judas in Martin Scorsese's next movie, set to shoot later this year. It'll be a gender-reversed modern telling of the biblical events set in Southern California. Oh my God, I do not want to watch that at all. Not even a little bit.
I'll take things society doesn't need for $1,200, Alex.
I don't want to. Why?
I just saw like to be honest. I mean, yeah, it comes from Verity, I guess. I was my initial thought was
variety. It's an American it's an English word.
It's not how they say it in Canada. Okay,
Verity. Oh.
Oh, is that how you say that there, huh?
Yeah, so he's making a movie, huh?
Oh, pretty neat there.
He's on Verity.
Yeah. Oh, Emma Stone's playing Jesus Christ in the next movie.
I love her.
Oh, Jesus.
But it just kind of goes into a lot of our culture talk that we've had in recent episodes.
Yeah.
But I found that interesting.
Wow. Jesus has been gender swapped.
Yeah.
Well,
Christians are not going to be pumped about
apparently
that,
Jesus was transgender.
A lot of long hair.
Didn't teach you about that in Sunday school, did they?
All right, on to Gary Gensler, the Batman villain that currently runs the SEC.
Before we do that, I got to go throw up real quick. I'll be right back.
Let's take a break.
Just kidding. I do need to take a break. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Where were we?
We were just about to talk about Gary Gensler.
So penguins are going mainstream. Gary Gensler has endorsed Bitcoin as a spot
No,
ETF.
he wanted to be very clear that this was not an endorsement of Bitcoin. He tweeted that out.
This means Bitcoin was actually originally designed by the CIA because the government has now endorsed it. So if
no,
I just spit out random BS
look. If you want to see why that's not true, look at Elizabeth Warren and Gary Gensler's Twitter feeds.
I think they're not thrilled.
Nah,
they're
man.
not sad.
They're not
happy.
No, that sort of thing.
The SEC was forced into this because of a court decision. They had to make this decision because the courts ruled that the SEC was being ridiculous.
Courts are run by the Illuminati.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. But no, so precursor. I actually think that there's a lot of important context to this story because on Tuesday, the day before this all happened. Oh, it was probably the most hilarious fun I've had in like a 30-minute time slot ever. So there's a lot of rumors going up to the thing which happened Wednesday. Is it Wednesday? Am I getting my dates wrong here?
No, you're right. It was midweek.
Yeah, it was. So I believe on the 10th is when all the rumors were saying 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Bitcoin spot ETF is coming through. What that is there's a bunch of people, they're putting a Bitcoin fund together. You can buy into the Bitcoin fund in the same way that you would buy into like a gold ETF
Like
fund.
on the stock exchange.
Yeah, exactly.
Not through like a crypto platform or anything.
Yeah, you can go through your, not your Vanguard account. They made it very clear that they're not allowing it. But anywhere else that you have like your 401k or something, they pretty much are allowing you to have Bitcoin now. But what ends up happening is the SEC a day early at about 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I believe the exact tweet was at 2:11 p.m. For us, so 4:11. They tweet out and let me actually just pull up the tweet right here that it's approved. Coming from the official SEC account. Today, the SEC grants approval for Bitcoin ETFs for listing on all registered national securities exchanges. The approved Bitcoin ETFs will be subject to the ongoing surveillance and compliance measures to ensure continued investor protection. And then about 10 minutes later, Gary Gensler, the chairman of the SEC, tweets out.
Who's in a graphic below that, which is very interesting. If you're not watching, it literally shows the USEC Gov Twitter account saying today the SEC grants approval to #Bitcoin, and and it has the whole, Twitter thing. ETFs for listing all registered national security exchanges. The approved Bitcoin ETFs will be subject to ongoing surveillance and compliance measures to ensure continued investor protection, which sounds very government official. It even has like a little graph that has a Gary Gensler quote, and I can't read it. What does it say?
Well, and it's the quote says inside of it, today's approval enhances market transparency and provides investors with efficient access to digital asset investments within a regulated framework. Chairman Gary Gensler.
Whoever did this did it well. And then so it's 2.2 million views on that.
This is when I took the screenshot, which was about 3 minutes after this.
Love this.
So then, about 10 minutes after that post comes out, Gary Gensler from his official account says the SEC government Twitter account was compromised and an unauthorized tweet was posted. The SEC has not approved the listing and trading of spot Bitcoin exchange traded products. So the market just goes crazy volatile. It's just like everybody's like, what the hell is happening right now, right? And Gary Gensler, he tried to be like, X's security, all this stuff, all these things.
Blame it on anyone else.
Tries to blame it on anyone else.
Yeah.
So, what you end up having, and then you end up having Edward Snowden was hilarious.
Oh, Edward Snowden.
Edward Snowden was so funny on this. So an old tweet resurfaced here. U.S. Securities Exchange from them back in October. Careful what you read on the internet. The best source of information about the SEC is the SEC.
Is that right?
And Edward Snowden's out here. Jesus Christ, Gary, get your shit together. You had one job. And then he tweets out, I tweeted this from the wrong account again. because anybody that's in crypto knows that a very big and famous crypto account that goes by Zach XBT is Edward Snowden. This has 6-figure followers, and he is tweeting out a screenshot of an old Gary tweet saying, "This is a reminder to secure your financial accounts as well as protect against identity theft and fraud. Remember to use strong passphrases or passwords. Set up multi-factor authentication. Keep account alerts turned on. Hashtag Cybersecurity Awareness Month." So then Zach XBT, Edward Snowden, tweets out the exact same thing with that screenshot.
That's so funny.
Because Gary started being kind of like, oh, X's security, blah, blah, blah. And then X's safety team tweeted out exactly what happened. And it turns out that our government agencies didn't even have two-factor authentication on. and that there was no internal problems on Twitter's end, X's end. And that basically showcasing that it looks like the SEC got SIM swapped, which is a common phishing scam. Just a very common phishing scam. You get a bunch of information, then it's kind of like a social hacking, social engineering. Then you go to T-Mobile and be like, "Hello, I'm Gary Gensler," right? I guess that's something like that happened, and then they got the SIM information for them to get into the Twitter account because there was no two-factor authentication. And also, if you're using two-factor authentication through through a telephone number, that is the most common way that this would happen. So even if they probably would have gotten hit by this. But so our government agencies just got hacked easily.
And just trolled super hard.
And manipulated markets.
Yeah. And I think that's
the
an
agency that is supposed to prevent from market manipulation.
Enabled it. Wow. Yeah. Should have enabled two-factor authentication instead.
Come on, Gary.
Yikes.
But
yikes.
So I find it hilarious. The government got SIM swapped. Hilarious. It's just so funny. It's so juicy. But then the next day, so this raised a lot of speculation here, is that was this a tweet that was just supposed to go out the next day?
And it just got released early.
Yeah, and then some intern has to change up the tweet.
That's funny. Yeah,
I don't think that's the case because the SEC account started liking a bunch of crypto-related tweets
that day
when this was all happening. I don't think that was the case. Like there was a speculation that maybe somebody just failed to schedule the post on the right day, or something.
Sure.
I don't think that's true, but.
Seems like a big oversight, even for just like a staffer who was in charge of the Twitter account. But pretty important to have good control over the SEC Twitter account, especially given that crypto is so Twitter heavy. And tweets can move this market, and that's a unique thing about the crypto space is that in a lot of ways isn't subject to the same sort of regulations in a lot of ways that traditional markets like the stock exchange are. They can be moved very readily by fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or news that things might be happening, or rumors that things might be happening,
which is common for any like low market cap thing, because there's just like less liquidity.
Sure.
There's like very common, like it's much harder to move the price of gold because it's a $10 trillion market. Bitcoin right now is like 800 billion, or it's like close to $1 trillion. So it's like 1/10 of gold as total market cap. So when you have that, it's much easier to sway markets, especially when you have probably one of the most important decisions coming from a regulation body here. Because if this went a different way and they're like, nope, we're never doing it, and we're banning Bitcoin. Much different story, right?
Imagine if someone hacked the Federal Reserve's Twitter account and then said we're jacking interest rates up 20%. What would happen to the price of
Our
gold?
entire economy would go under.
That is the sovereign individual thesis.
Explain.
You have these enormous institutions that, because of the internet, are now vulnerable to singular actors with no standing military, no massive power, no ability to nuke anybody or shoot a blade shooting drone bomb sort of high tech, destruction sort of thing, can cause immense havoc just by having access to an internet and the knowledge and capability and will to mess with somebody. So that's the change in the logic of violence that we've experienced since the introduction of the internet, that is reworking the relationship between governments and their people.
Is that a good or bad thing?
Great. If you believe in individualism, I think it's a progression that we're moving towards.
Yeah, it's not. The observation itself isn't good or bad, right? It's just what it is. The interpretive layer that I would suggest is that anytime an individual can push back on a collective, that's probably a good thing. But there could be exceptions, right? Anytime an individual who's saying, hey, I really want to make my money on Bitcoin, and this guy's been literally, this guy's the worst actor. Gary Gensler, embarrassing that guy is a great thing, because he's been such a terrible actor on this stuff since he became SEC chair, and partly because of Elizabeth Warren and Biden and kind of the left wing's approach to the whole market of the new technologies.
There's a whole wing of senators and congressmen that have been trying to get him fired for like 2 years now.
Well, to be clear, he was the guy in control during the whole Sam Bankman-Fried FTX scandal, right?
And he's also somebody like, he's not ignorant to crypto. He used to teach blockchain classes in the early days of Bitcoin at MIT. He understands the technology pretty well. His classes are online. I've watched some of them. He's actually pretty intelligent, but also in his role, he's not allowed to invest in the stuff, which is interesting.
So you think he might just be?
No, I think that it's similar to like the Nikki Haley phenomenon. Like he's going with the sources that are around him, right? Like I don't think it's necessarily that he's got this major vendetta against crypto. I don't even think like Elizabeth Warren. Like here's a tweet from her right now. The SEC is wrong on the law and wrong on the policy with respect to the Bitcoin ETF decisions. If the SEC is going to let crypto burrow even deeper into our financial system, then it's more urgent than ever that crypto follow basic anti-money laundering rules. And then she obviously gets community noted, saying the SEC acted in accordance to new circumstances brought up by the judge in the Grayscale Investments case versus the SEC. And this is admitted by the SEC chair, Gary Gensler. And it's also like, these ETFs are more subject to anti-money laundering laws than anything in crypto. Like this is probably for her side, she should be like, yes, nice, that's great. Because if you're going to be investing in crypto or in Bitcoin specifically via BlackRock or Fidelity, you are putting your social security number and your identification all over that thing.
But to be clear though, U.S. crypto exchanges do already require KYC laws, which are know your customer laws, which are a part of anti-money laundering measures. So it's not like people are evading being known when they're trading in crypto. legitimately within the United States, if you're not using a VPN or trying
Going
to
offshore,
evade
all this stuff, right? Yeah.
these measures, you're doing it by the same rules that you would if you were trading stocks.
This goes into the sovereign individual argument, though, too, is it's becoming increasingly difficult to actually regulate that. And these people are trying to maintain control over that because simple things like a VPN can get around American laws. There's a lot of things in the crypto industry where you end up getting geo-blocked. Just because you're in the United States. So like literally hop over to Mexico, hop over to Canada and you're fine. But if you're in the United States, you can't do things.
Not financial advice.
Yeah. It's actually within the United States.
Showcases how lack of freedom we actually have when it comes to financing, right?
Fair point.
Like I can go almost anywhere in the world if I wanted to with a VPN and have more freedom when it comes in this industry than I would in America. Something to think about, right?
Right, and the perverse incentive. And honestly, Americans like Elizabeth Warren, who are supposedly out to, protect us, right, pushing investment to other countries in order to, protect us, when it actually just moves the wealth and prosperity that was possible through new technological innovation into other areas, other countries.
Are members of Congress just insider trading through other countries? Are they just using VPNs? Is that how they do it? They're like, well, if I do it through some guy I know in Colombia.
To be completely honest, I actually think a lot of the insider trading stuff with Congress is overblown. I think that there's like a very simple Pareto distribution that exists here, where you have a very small number of congressmen that are like
Nancy
doing
Pelosi.
Exceptionally well.
Nancy
But
Pelosi.
most congressmen are like just hovering around the S&P 500, like when it turns to their actual gains, and a lot are actually below the S&P 500. So like you end up having some people that are doing exceptionally well, but it's not like everyone in Congress is. But that's the case with investing in general.
But
a
is
lot
there
of
an
people
overlay with information that those people have that
for sure.
other congressmen don't?
For sure, and especially with like friends and stuff. Like that's the insider trading stuff.
Additionally, there are tons of rules around this, and they aren't easy to get around. But do they get around them? Open question. I mean, we want to have a high standard of evidence for such things.
I personally think that a lot of the calls for banning insider trading is going to end up I actually view it in a very similar way I view term limits, where it feels really good to say, but what's going to end up happening is a much more power distribution is going to end up going into the hands of lobbyists, unions, things like that. It's just going to shift how things work. And I actually think that we should continue to allow congressmen to trade, because there should be almost an incentive for them to do better at their jobs. Otherwise,
that's an interesting perspective.
Like if you believe in the government, like if you actually believe in the thing. I'm an anarchist. I don't really care. But like I think if you actually believe in government, you should be having more incentives for them. Like it's not necessarily to manipulate markets, but in order to dilute the power away from the unelected people, which is going to be the union people and everybody that we kind of hate.
Okay, so if decision-making opportunity with respect to the financial gain that comes from having knowledge first, starts with maybe the entities that are closest to that information, which may be, let's say, defense contractors or people within the Gang of Eight or something, like know about a war that's going to happen, and that's going to boost military-industrial complex stocks, right? If those people are allowed to act on that information, you're saying that sort of makes them like a canary in the coal mine in some way, or like how does that necessarily
they're just going to reshift allocation.
How does that positively shift their decision making towards something that's perhaps better for everyone versus just better for their stock portfolio?
Most people investing are insider trading to some degree. It's such a vague term that it's kind of difficult. It's very ambiguous, because like most people, if you're in the BlackRocks of the world or Vanguard or like any of these people, any of the big corporate entity, they're all operating with insider knowledge. Everyone is. And it's like the Congress people are doing what they can as well. Everybody's trying to manipulate the markets. Everybody's lying to the journalists. Everybody to try to get the money to go up and down. It's so ridden across the entire financial industry. I don't think that just banning stock trading wholeheartedly really
Well, it's not just stock trading. It's
insider trading,
you have
which is already illegal.
Well, the rule for Congress people, right, is that they have to put their investments into a blind trust where they have no intimate knowledge of what's being traded and what's not being traded within their portfolio. Is that correct?
I think so.
Blind
Something
trust?
like that.
Because if they have,
which then Nancy just gives it to her husband, right?
Well, right,
because it's Paul Pelosi that's doing all.
And
the
then
trading.
she goes home over dinner and says, "Oh, well, yeah, interesting. Sounds like we're going to be bombing the Houthis today."
Yeah, but
so.
what's to stop them from just continuing to do that? Like, are you supposed to then ban all of their family from trading? If given senator, it's just like, my second cousin's not allowed to trade now. Where do we go? The whole thing doesn't actually make sense on how the money manipulation.
The better
works.
option would be to have a government so small you can't manipulate the stock markets with the action of government.
That's
the only way around it. It's the same story with the term limits. You can't actually solve the problem of term limits unless you limit the government. The effort by the anti-federalists or by the anti-constitutionalists, like the people who are pushing back against the implementation of the Constitution in the first place, were the very people who are saying the problem is that we're giving too much government authority to a centralized government, and this is going to eventually blow up into a larger government, and they were right.
So what you're saying is you can't stop insiders from trading on the information that they have. Somehow, someone is going to benefit from someone knowing something that other people don't.
The institutional knowledge matters. And I should actually explain why I'm kind of against term limits. Because a lot of people are probably going to be like, Kyle's against term limits? What? That doesn't make sense. The reason for it is because I think I actually understand how politics works in these environments. When you end up having just constantly freshman senators come in or freshman congressmen, they have no idea what the hell is going on around them. They're getting pulled in all these different directions from all these forces that they don't even understand because of this lobbyist group, that group spending a bunch of money on PACs, all these things, right? And it takes them several years to actually understand what the hell is going on so that they can actually do anything. And if we're just no, you only got 4 years in there, it puts all of the power into the lobbyists' hands, into the unions' hands, the people that are those manipulative forces. But theoretically, in a democracy, if you believe in this mythology, if you allow for a senator to exist for 40 years, that person actually becomes a very powerful player. Now, the problem is a lot of these senators that exist for 40 years are terrible, right? But what about the Rand Pauls of the world? Don't you want him to be there for 40 years? Do you want him to have to retire? Because most of us and most people that listen to this podcast like Rand Paul, Ron Paul, that type of thing, right?
So insider trading was actually banned in 2012 with the Stock Act. 78 members of Congress have failed to properly report their financial trades as mandated by the Stock Act since its implementation in 2012. The average penalty is $200.
Penalty for what?
For violating the Stock Act.
Wow,
that's just a fee on your TD Ameritrade account.
Yeah, so it's a difficult question. Obviously people are following the perverse incentives, but what typically happens with insider trading is it's not the member of Congress that is going to be actually held accountable. It's going to be Martha Stewart or somebody else, right? It's going to be someone in a very different set of circumstances, dealing with not even that much power to do things, right?
Okay, so is this a question of the justice system not being fairly applied, though? Because if Martha Stewart trades on insider information, she's punished. But if Nancy Pelosi does, or if Paul Pelosi does, Nancy is not punished. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem like a fair enough argument, because there are other problems within the context of that situation. I don't disagree with you, though, in your broader point, which is that senators and representatives could be allowed to trade on whatever information that they might have, but the government should be so small and more broadly so uninfluential based on its small size and scope that their information shouldn't actually impact the markets at all.
Yeah, and that's effectively the case of in defending the undefeatable. Walter Block makes the case that insider trading itself is action and economizing on knowledge.
Yeah,
right, and that what you want is a situation where you maximize knowledge spread for markets to operate efficiently. And when someone is the first person to get knowledge, like for example, the person who discovered that Exxon was actually bankrupt, he insider traded technically. Now we don't punish him because what he did was actually benefit. He like used that knowledge. He bought a bunch of puts
That's why it's
against
such a
Exxon
vague
and then released the
thing.
information and made a ton of money. Right? We don't punish that, but we do punish Martha, and then we don't punish Elizabeth Warren.
Well,
right?
and that raises the thing too is like, if you listen to this podcast, we talked about the likelihood of the spot Bitcoin ETF coming in, but like everybody in the crypto that pays attention and has been paying attention through the bear market completely knew that, like I said on this podcast several months ago, January is when the spot ETF is going to happen, not financial advice. Like I said that, and it was very clear is because Coinbase was getting all the custody for all these ETF products. They're custodying most of it. And like, that's all public information. It's just like, you're just operating on the information that's in front of you. And sometimes it's private, sometimes it's quasi-public. It's like, what does this mean? Like, what information can you not trade on? What can you trade on? Like, does it mean that people in Coinbase shouldn't be allowed to buy Bitcoin because they know that they're custodying the stuff? They're like where does this, it's, how do you manage all this stuff, right?
A pretty humorous anecdote around this is something that Bennett shared to our group chat, which was the guy who asked, is it insider trading if I bought Boeing puts while I'm inside of the wrecked airplane where the door had flown off? Like that's just smart thinking. If you're that guy and you have the foresight to do that.
That's the question of banning insider trading. It's ultimately a question of like, is it wrong to know a thing and then operate on it for your financial gain?
Well, remember Silicon Valley Bank? The guy cashed out like all of his shares a month beforehand. Like he knew that thing was going down.
Yeah.
The question though is, what responsibility does that guy have as a fiduciary of the interest of the investors,
That's contractual law.
The other investors in the company?
That's
contractual
actually
law.
a great point, Joe, actually, is because he does have a fiduciary responsibility to his shareholders, and that is a contract that exists.
So
he could be sued for that now, right? Nothing keeps the stakeholders or the people he signed that contract with from suing him for failing his fiduciary responsibility. Additionally, I know there are active regulatory protections for fiduciary responsibility, but you do have the contract law there, which is the traditional way in which that was enforced. So that's the question. As usual in debates about when to use government, the question is whether or not we should use it prohibitionarily, meaning we establish a bureaucracy who then manages behavior, or we should do it after there's been an injury where people enforce their rights using evidentiary and adversarial process of the courts.
Which makes way more sense.
Yes.
Because trying to front run all the possible wrongdoing that could go on is an absolute fool's errand. There's no way to do that fairly or justly, right? And all you're going to end up doing is prohibiting things that might be actually good for a market, right?
Right. And so in this case, I think we should be looking at, should we have Congress with the power to move markets or not? Like, that's the more fundamental question. Should we have a separation between government and economy so the government's just here to protect our rights? Or should we have one that manages the economy? If we had one that couldn't manage the economy, there would be no reason for them to be able to move markets with this way.
Yeah.
Right? If Bitcoin was always just a legal asset that you could own just like any other asset, rather than this weird, is it money? Is it an asset? Is it a stock? Is it a security? All this stuff, when obviously it's none of those things. It's what it is.
Yeah.
Right? But we got to put it into the framework designed in 1930, right? Because it's an insane process. And rather than evolve with any of that stuff, it's like a dinosaur, right? We're like dealing with dinosaur structures to deal with a digital age. And rather than dealing with any of this, the entire generation of leadership is just have their heads in the sand, trying to keep it from ever being a thing, like Elizabeth Warren.
You know what I think we should do? I think we should have all members of Congress have like a public Robinhood account. That's the only way they can trade. And everyone can just like peg their account to Nancy Pelosi's account.
Well, we already have that. That's already a tool. What's the tool called?
The Pelosi tracker or whatever.
There's all these
it got
tools
banned on Twitter though.
Yeah.
The Pelosi tracker got banned on
there
Twitter.
are financial tools that allow you to automatically buy whatever a range of government officials buy.
Well, yeah, but like days after when it becomes public knowledge via some sort of disclosure via the SEC, it should be instantaneous.
I'm sure-
when the trade is made, you can make the same exact trade.
I'm sure somebody has an index fund for that. It's the same thing like Jim Cramer. There's a whole index fund for just the
inverse Cramer.
Yeah, the inverse Cramer index fund, which is just which I am more than convinced that Jim Cramer is totally a tool that is meant for market manipulation, as he's kind of just retired on a show kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Where like I think that it is just a very clear. It might even be an unspoken agreement that exists,
dude.
Because this is how markets work. Like I'm not kidding. This is how markets work and how traders operate.
Yeah.
Where when he says something, everybody that's privy does the opposite. And I think that he is like a purposeful tool for that,
dude.
To send market signals.
The inverse Cramer ETF does very well.
This morning he was like,
there's a meme, dude. There's a meme. I gotta say this. I think I got shown this like a couple of days ago, where it's a meme of Jim Cramer, like, you know, some nice photo of him, and it's like, what a nice asset you have. It would be a shame if I spoke positively about it. It's like, so true.
In this ETF stuff, Jim Cramer has changed his mind about Bitcoin 7 times in the last 12 hours. like I'll pull his tweet.
Jets game.
He talks about a lot of other stuff apparently.
Bonds
rallying like
no, go up
6 hours.
Wait. Bonds rallying like crazy. Now go up above the ads here. Calling this bond rally unprecedented.
Yeah,
just really oh man.
but yeah, top. This is not the ETF. It is a trust. No, he sends FUD, and then he's like,
major
Bitcoin
top
is a
in
future
Bitcoin.
asset. Yeah, major top in Bitcoin. Just this morning, like I know I tweeted back at him saying that I love him because he was calling the bottom of Bitcoin. but like this morning he was saying that. And now he's like top. You know, it's like it's crazy.
Classic Cramer.
Jeez.
Just doing Jim stuff. All right, I want to talk about our last topic, and we'll do this one quick because it's 2 hours, 20 minutes in. So the Biden administration, I got a little chart so we can visualize real quick on the notes here, Kyle. The Biden administration has decided to directly, now we've been funding a war of genocide against the Houthis in Yemen for quite some time. Going all the way back to the Obama administration, we talked about a little bit. We really got to do a long-term breakdown because it's a classic example of how a long-term U.S. security commitment has created a series of perverse incentives that have corrupted American democracy in this really pernicious way that really has put us head over heels in a strained place with this particular situation where we've been saying, hey, Saudi Arabia, you can continue your war and we'll do it by proxy. Over the last, God, how long has it been since the Obama administration? 6 years? 12 years, 10 years.
I blacked out.
Over 8 years.
Anyways, very long time where we've been doing this bombing and blockade campaign before. And just to remind everybody, before the situation in Gaza, it was the number one world problem, right? When it comes to everyday people being killed by a government. And that was the bombing of the Houthis by the Saudis on our behalf, right? Well, not on our behalf. That's not right. Funded by,
we were fueling the jets.
It's a little bit even more than that. We were training the pilots on the jets. We were repairing the jets. We were using our sea craft to support their landing and things like that. So
and going to the Obama administration too is also the sanctions that were involved, which was like starving out the Yemenis economy. The global community told them that, hey, you guys should hyper focus on just coffee. That'd be cool. You guys should just do that. And then we put sanctions on them after, and 80% of their economy was coffee. So they had no food and everybody just started starving, right? And Obama said, in order to placate the Saudis, this is why we must do this.
Right. Because they were ticked off about the Iran deal, right? So they didn't like Obama's Iran deal because they want to go to war with Iran to keep them from being a competitor across the Middle East. So because he was making peace with Iran, we had to get involved in the genocide. So we've been doing this in there for all this time. Now with the conflict in Israel, there have been several attacks near boardings of U.S. and other ships that are moving through the Red Sea. Now this is the area going from the Mediterranean across what canal am I thinking of here in Egypt? Suez Canal. Into the Red Sea and then out by the Arabian Peninsula and into the Indian Ocean. So with that little area there, you see the extra stripes. It is a tremendous amount of goods pass through that area. but not just American goods. Important to know. So we don't like piracy unless we're the ones doing it, as we've proved on this podcast.
Based.
Captain Biden.
Based.
So this is a response to that. Now, one of the questions that have come back from that is you have a substantial congressional pushback of people from Congress saying, hey, where's the congressional authorization? The U.S. Constitution requires a declaration of war before the president can go to war. This is an act of war. Where is it? And pretty much the debate now is just that. Is this a U.S. security interest that would trigger the War Powers Act of the 1960s or not? And is this just a policing action or something like that? Or is this part of the war on terror? The Biden administration's been a little unclear about where they're exactly going to land in their argumentation. They probably don't want to really come out with anything until they actually have to defend something by law in a court. So that happened.
That did indeed happen.
Today.
It's just, I feel bad for Yemen. Like, I remember back in the day when we initially started the war under Obama, I remember sitting in my office and my interns were outside and me just like pulling up a news story and being like, we're at war with Yemen, and my interns used to make fun of me for it because they just heard me screaming that from my office.
Right, and so it just goes to show you just how much of this, if it is indeed just that we are doing this in order to appease the Saudis, what that means, like how much does oil movement from the Arabian Peninsula determine things across the globe, including U.S. military expenditures? That's incredible. That's insane. Additionally, that like going around the Horn of Africa adds a lot of miles, right? So it's a lot of money. So how much is this just driven? How much do you, and this is the question, Joe, how much do you want your foreign policy to be driven by the question of how you should get cheap goods? Interesting question.
Interesting question.
How many people would you be okay with dying because of a foreign policy driven by that?
Well, I don't like people dying. First and foremost. So.
Wow, controversial.
Yeah, I know. Hot take.
Hot opinion. I want to be clear. I've always been opposed to genocides. I want to be clear.
100%.
The people.
Okay. Wild. So, where do we go from here? What's next on this saga?
That's about it, right? I mean, it's really early to say. We don't have any like congressional official pushback, resolution, stuff like that. We can cover it if it comes up, but otherwise, it's a way to think about it is it's not a new story because we've had continual warfare in the Middle East for 24 years now. And just seeing this as another chapter of that is a way to see it, but you can also see it as a new step, right? Where, the president's pretty much unilaterally saying, hey, if it affects global trade, it's enough for us to just get interfered with, just jump into the middle of. That's not new in a lot of levels too. So it also is like, is this news? Well, it's just a difficult thing to say because it's like,
yeah, pretty par for the course, I guess.
Right. What is the overall death toll?
But we shouldn't be thinking in terms of the soft bigotry of low expectations, right? We should have a standard for our U.S. foreign policy that isn't, well, whatever keeps us the cheap goods flowing. Because that then you kind of are a participant in a genocide, whether you like it or not.
So there's some interesting stats here. The estimations, so between 2015 and 2022, they estimate 377,000 people in Yemen have died due to all of the foreign conflict. And 60% of that actually is coming from the sanctions that were put on because like you can't just eat coffee, that you can't live off just coffee because that's pretty much all they had.
I beg to differ. I can and I have.
You can. Well,
oh my God. It's really dark when you think about it in terms of this.
I'm more of a medium roast kind of guy.
A little starvation blockade going on.
Two-thirds of the population of Yemen, which is 21.6 million people, are in need of dire assistance, is the estimations here. Death toll in Yemen's war since 2015 reached 100,000. Yeah. Overall, a lot of the estimations I've seen is about 1 million people probably total in all this since the Obama administration's kind of initial stuff in the 2015 time.
And so note that we will freak out and do all this billions of dollars of spending in order to stop the war in Ukraine because of that. We won't do it for Azerbaijan. And we're actually going to come on the side of the bad guys in terms of Yemen.
Well, and a lot of, for the conservatives here to complain about something, I'll give them some red meat here to maybe get them more interested in the subject, is a lot of this has to do with Hillary Clinton's manipulation of elections in Yemen back when she was Secretary of State. They straight up were like propping up Saudi sock puppets. Like there was an election where there was one guy on the ballot and they're like, yes, democracy.
Yes.
And then that guy got really upset later on and just kind of joined with the rebels afterwards and took all the stuff so like we tried to like overthrow one guy, we propped up another guy, we gave a bunch of weapons, then the guy that we propped up ended up turning on us and just took those weapons and joined with the rebels. It's a whole story there during the Hillary Clinton, like this is back when Libya was going on with Gaddafi and all this stuff, like prior to the 2015 era.
Benghazi.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
So the question is whether or not, and ultimately looking at this narrow topic as what should be the policy response to Houthis attacking ships of all kinds that are running from Europe, the Mediterranean, over to the Indian Ocean? What should we be doing about that? Well, before that the U.S. decided to get involved here, there was an increased amount of private security to protect these ships. That seems to me like a rational response to piracy as privateers, right? Can
you explain that a little more thoroughly? Privateers, like what's
just private sailors who are there to protect ships.
Private pirates.
Okay. So like
they're all
private security.
so like a Blackwater type kind of agency boarding these ships and protecting them from
Keep in mind the Houthis are probably equipped by Saudi's geopolitical opponent, Iran, but they're not the Russian military, right? They're not like a giant military force. They're rebels. Right. So these are dudes with RPGs and dudes with like MKs. They don't have like battleships and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And so much of foreign policy, I think people don't really fully conceptualize this, is just mercenary work. Like mercenaries flock to this region because there's a lot of money in it. They're just following incentives, right? And then they're getting paid and they're making decisions of like, well, how many men am I going to get killed in this if I end up taking this contract, and they're making business decisions. And like, we don't see mercenary stuff over here because we're not a region dominated by conflict, but mercenaries are all over the place when we're talking about the Middle East.
Additionally, it's a more historical way to solve a problem. Letters of marque and reprisal. Let's pretend for a moment that since 2000, it would probably be about 2012 to 2016 or 2015, there was largely a non-interventionist policy in this area. And U.S. wasn't involved in Saudi and Yemen elections and all the like local politics and all the minutia with the intelligence boys and all that kind of stuff. And imagine for a moment that just out of the blue, these pirates started attacking us. What would be the policy response? Well, you could respond militarily, but expensive. Or you could just issue a letter of marque or reprisal, say, hey, if anybody wants to take these out, here's $2 million.
Seems legit.
That's we've responded both ways. We've responded to piracy historically, both that and we responded like where we created the Marines, Halls of Montezuma and stuff like that, where we use an actual military to go take out a foreign adversary that was doing piracy. I'm not criticizing actually stopping piracy. I'm criticizing just like the, war on terror response to it. And we kind of created the situation by being meddlesome on Saudi Arabia's behalf in the first place. And then secondarily, like not pushing like a lot of people asked for, Bush failing to push for a Palestinian peace process, because this wouldn't be happening in the first place if we didn't have the Palestine issue in the beginning, in the first place. Because this only took up, they've been having this war in Saudi Arabia and Yemen for a very long time, since 2015. If they weren't, like, why are they only attacking now? It's because of Palestine.
Sure. Because of the recent flare up in conflict in the region.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and it's to get attention to it. It's to put pressure on it. It's to get people to care about the plight of the Palestinians. If that was taken off the table, this wouldn't be here. I mean, it would be here, but it would be here. It wouldn't have the same dynamic.
The United States seems to have spun up a pretty sizable response. And I forget what the operation is called. Prosperity Guardian, I think. Why hasn't that been effective? Based.
Prosperity Guard.
Why hasn't that been effective? Like, why has the quote unquote greatest military in the world not been able to, especially with coalition partners, and I'm not exactly entirely sure who those are, but like regional powers, why have we not been able to like protect these shipping vessels in the Red Sea? How are we allowing rebels to do what they're doing?
It might be that it was just too late, right? They just weren't in position to be able to do so. If you remember that a lot of the battleships and stuff like that were actually deployed to the Mediterranean, and they just weren't well positioned to do the protection. It does take time to move these sorts of things around. I don't know if they can actually go through the Suez Canal. There's dimensions questions there. I don't know if you can move a carrier through that. I just don't know.
Didn't we just move like a ton of our stuff outside of Israel, like in the Mediterranean, because of everything that was going on?
Yeah, so you think
we
they'd be
probably like
proximal to that.
massively allocated resources though, like.
But I imagine that's kind of what led to this, is that there were a range of attacks over the last 2 weeks, and now the policy response is coming, just because it does take time to move this kind of stuff around, and to do so in a safe way too. You don't want to overextend yourself and find yourself in a bad situation.
Oh yeah, heavens no, we would never want to overextend the United States military.
Yeah, or just
around the globe.
Yeah, I mean, you got to wonder about these carrier groups. Like, they can level many countries. So I'm very curious about what the threat level is from a Houthi pirates.
I mean, what is overextension? Like 1,000 bases? Is that probably where we're overextended?
I don't know. Yeah, like
is that
120 plus countries. I don't know. Like, yeah.
Like, I mean, we still got some leeway. If it's 1,000, we got some leeway.
Yeah, we got room.
Yeah, we got some room for.
It's like, we're the greatest country on the planet. We can't possibly be overextended.
No.
It's just a matter of believing. So I don't know. Like, was the response could have been faster if there was more foresight? It's hard to say. I don't know. There was a lot of predictions. If you remember, in October, of fear of this growing into a regional battle. Right, where you have Hezbollah in the north of Israel, as well as the fight over between Egypt and the shutting down the Suez Canal as a part of like the pawns going on, to how is Saudi Arabia and Iran going to relate to these things and play these games? Not to mention the kind of the more neutral states due to the Abrahamic Accords. How are they going to respond, and how that was going to either push towards the same sort of like machinery of Armageddon that we saw in World War I, where you have a initial domino falls and a lot of other people fall, and then before you know, you have a regional, if not worldwide war.
Well, if you think about it too, like think about Western Bloc versus Eastern Bloc of where everything's happening right now. It seems like everything is just like, there's like, if I could draw a red line down here, I could like divide exactly where everything is right now. It's like you have like a red line that exists right here if you're following my mouse.
Watch where you cut through Ukraine here, buddy.
Yeah, and then it's muddy in Ukraine. The line is confusing right now. It's a gray zone at the moment.
Yeah.
And then it comes down. You got like Eastern Turkey. It kind of cuts through Eastern Turkey.
It's a little weird. Azerbaijan through there.
Goes around Syria. Comes back up or over Iraq. Has Iran. So like there's a little, it's all muddy. They got to move. Everybody's fighting over a red line in this region right here. Iran sits over here. Iraq sits over here. Syria is confusing. They've been trying to get Syria for a while. We're probably in store for another gas attack soon. I'm sure Assad will gas his own people totally legitimately again on the third time here. He'll get it. He'll get them this time.
Dude, it smelled like gas to me.
It smelled like saran gas. Yep. But like, so like there's a red line there that everybody has to defend, right?
Mm-hmm. So that's the question. Is it like one way to see it is an East versus West? It gets a little complicated when we talk about India and get things more into Asia. But I think you see that as a battle line that goes on there. Yeah, for sure. Anyways, that's just something to let you guys know about. That continues. We should have Adam on here and we could talk about it some more sometime.
Adam Thuen, coming at you soon. Guys, any other thoughts before we close up?
Hey, you guys, it was a good one. I'm sorry my energy's low. I'm like still feeling like garbage. We're all feeling sick.
You look
Sorry,
and
guys.
sound great. Grandpa.
Yeah, not good.
I don't want to go outside. It's negative 20 out there.
Yeah. How cold is it where you live? Let us know in the comments how cold it is where you live. I guarantee you it's not as cold as where it is here because
listeners from South Africa, they're going like into the summertime right now.
Minus 17 degrees.
Yeah, baller, man.
Yeah, if you live in South Africa and you want to host the podcast, and have us down for a little trip.
I will snowbird down to South Africa to do the podcast. I mean, do we got any Saudi money that wants to fund podcast operations? Let's
If you are a Saudi prince and you want to fund the world's best independent news commentary show, get into our DMs.
Or you can just give us $9 a month on Substack.
Let's do a podcast on a pirate ship.
Pod on a pirate ship. I love it. I love it. Hey, let's do it.
We'll rebrand.
Yar. We'll be the Houthi reaction.
Oh, God.
Okay. That's enough trouble for one day. Thanks for watching. Joe Sheehan, David Rand, Kyle Mack. Bennett's not here today. Screw that guy. See y'all later.
Messiah.
Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Help us fight internet censorship by liking, commenting, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with your friends. To find us around the internet, visit linktree.com/humanreactionpod. And remember,
apparently Jesus was transgender.
A lot of long hair.
Didn't teach you about that in Sunday school, did they?